Ready to go? All right, I will call the meeting to order. Review the agenda for removal or adjustments of any items.
We have one addition, and that will be sec. Okay, that will be to an approval of a UVM consulting archaeology program for the Basin Street analysis. That's a quick thing just to approve that.
Where are we on?
I would do that as
On a regular business?
no consent. We can do that. Let's do that as 6D.
D?
Yeah. Thank you.
Ready. Oath of office. Who do I gotta swear at? Oh, come on.
Okay, you ready?
I'm ready. Do I gotta raise my right hand or anything?
Yeah.
Here's your Bible.
I, John Peter Heffernan,
I, John Peter Heffernan,
do solemnly swear and affirm that I will faithfully execute the office of Select Board
do solemnly swear and affirm that I will execute the office of select board
for a 2-year term
for a 2-year term
within and for said town,
within and for said town,
and will therein do equal right and justice
and will bear and do equal right and justice
to all persons in the best of my judgment
to all persons in the best of my judgment
and abilities according to law.
and abilities according to law.
I also solemnly swear affirm
I also solemnly swear or affirm
that I will support the Constitution of the state of Vermont
that I will support the Constitution of the state of Vermont
and of the United States.
and of the United States.
Perfect.
So, right there, please. Okay, copy here. Swear it is. Everybody? All right, public forum, opportunity
Thanks,
to,
Chris.
thanks, Chris. We don't do the Zoom overview anymore.
No.
We're over that.
We're over that.
Public forum, opportunity for anybody who's not on the agenda to speak. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Bob Anderson. I live in Bristol. I'm retired and glad to be here. I have 2 quick questions. First of all, I have a lot of business contacts and personal friends in Canada. They're not totally happy with our country these days. Has anyone thought of putting up maybe one Canadian flag on the main street along with all the many nice US flags? Yeah, just as a gesture for people. The second question is, where is the proposal for a reduced speed limit these days? Is it dead or is there any action on it? If you drive anywhere in Vermont, say from Bennington all the way up to Highgate, every town has a lower speed limit except Bristol. Is this an active issue?
We have a lower speed limit. It's 45 coming in each end of town and steps down to 30.
Right, many towns have 20 to 25.
Yeah, we have been working on trying to get it to 25, but we have not had any luck. Based
What
on
is the obstacle?
state statute and traffic study.
Can you just do it anyway? Every other town has. What, do they shut down the town for doing it? I don't understand.
Oh, we Bruce is on, Bruce could probably explain it better. We can do it, but we can't enforce it for how many years, Bruce?
It's 5 years.
So we could lower it to 25, but we wouldn't be able to enforce it at 25 for 5 years.
So do we have to wait forever until the 5-year period starts? I don't understand why nothing's been done.
Well, it's a combination of things. So if you're looking at the state, they require a bunch of data if you want to reduce your speed limit in your town or village. And if you have data that supports that people are going under the speed limit, that is cause for lowering your speed limit. If you have data that supports cars that are going over the speed limit, a certain amount, then the reduction of speed via signs isn't the first move that you would make. You would try to have traffic calming measures before you reduce your assigned speed limit. So we run into that problem in prior discussions. We also have the issue, we are designated downtown, so we do have preference in terms of lowering our speed, but there are also set distances and signage rules and regulations if you're changing from one speed to another. And so because of the design of the village, it's a little bit difficult to sort of step down to the speeds if we're going from 40 or 45 to 30, then to 25 or 20 at certain areas. So we're looking at that as well.
So it's still an active issue under.
It is, yeah. Yeah, and it's also deciding in some areas, because we have fairly long distances getting into the main street area, 30 seems acceptable in terms of the data that we've collected over time. But then it's in more densely sort of populated or densely where the shops are, that's where we really want to reduce it. But then again, it's that distance in terms of letting people know and stepping down in the speed that we have to be careful of. And there are state rules in terms of the distances that you can put signs and how many signs you need to be worn and things like that. So it's still an active issue.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? Great. Moving on. Department head roundtable. Sharon.
I have. Take it.
Where am I?
I got a tooth pulled today.
Oh.
So,
They must have been deep rooted.
What have we been working on this week? Reconciliation, getting more information to the auditors, got a ballpark timeframe of May-ish for the first round of the audit.
For
the
23?
preliminary results
Mm.
Of the 23. that
Okay.
we're
And
finishing up.
24, it's 2 years.
Yeah, they're
Okay.
trying to get both
Okay.
in one shot. 24 maybe a little later, but
Okay.
definitely 23 for May,
Great.
whatever the goal was. What else? Oh, so the new computer out front desk, so that Yale's computer actually is functional. And I don't know, seems like a lot more we did, but that's all I can remember.
Did you get a tooth pulled as well?
No need for me this week.
Oh, already. Grants, Frida.
Good evening, everybody. So not a lot of reporting to do. We did submit at the end of last week our LWCF grant, which was it's a really big one. We put in for 400,000. That's for the skate park construction project. So it is a very large one. It is connected to federal funds, so it goes through a ton of review, and we will not actually get an answer until about this time next year, February of next year, which Taylor was kind of exasperated about, but I reminded her that means you have less than 1 year to start fundraising. So you should see some local activity around getting public engagement and some fundraising efforts going for that. And we are looking at applying for the AOT Structures Grant, possibly for additional funding for Basin Street. And if you do see that coming, that'll be in at your next meeting for approval. I'm still seeking approval from the state that there's no funding conflict for the existing awards for that project. And I think Ian and I were going to start working soon, looking for some funding for your water line replacement project. And that might include some big funds from congressional directed funding, which used to be called earmarks, which is a really big project. So we'll work together to look at that and see what the eligibility is for that. But those are some big projects that we are looking for funds for right now. Oh, and we just closed out successfully the FEMA 4810, which is the 2024 storm event, which was your smaller one, where Ireland Road was damaged. A portion of that area was damaged. And so that has successfully been closed out for the feds, transitioned to the state. So we're really literally just waiting for the money from that, and it'll be just shy of $10,000. They did warn us to to wait longer than normal, which is saying something for the state, because they currently are down to 3 people working on the financials for FEMA. And as you can imagine, they are really flooded with work. So we'll have those funds at some point. It'll be a while though.
Really flooded, no pun intended.
Sorry, yes.
Any questions for Frida? Thank you. Anybody from Retcon?
Meredith will not be zooming in this evening. She is feeling poorly.
All right, and AZ is not coming on.
Maisie
until
might be
later.
traveling.
They left,
She's gonna zoom in later. right?
trying to, I got a text a few minutes ago. At 6:30, yeah, it's gonna be probably
Okay.
15 minutes
Yeah,
out.
they're here later on anyway
Yeah.
for 2 items, so we can
All right.
ask. And that's what the AZ's been working on in the last couple of weeks.
Perfect. Consent agenda, treasurer's appointment, Sharon Lucia. Approval of technology reserve funds for the clerk treasurer's laptop. Update, authorized signature for ANR and SRF payments. And the archaeological
Yeah.
survey on Basin Street.
Make a motion, the consent agenda.
Any
Second.
comments, questions?
Okay, so we've got Sharon, whose appointment needs to be updated. And I think we're gonna synchronize it with your clerk appointment, which is for another 2 years.
Correct.
So that would be March 2027. Is that correct? With my math? So
5, 6, 7.
I did not have a tooth pulled, and it's still terrible with my, so 27. And so that's for Sharon as the treasurer. And I asked Sharon if she wanted to still be the treasurer, and she said yes. So I think that's a great thing. And I think she's been doing an excellent job with Chris as well. And then we've got the laptop quote. Chris, you want to speak to that?
Sure, Sharon's laptop is, for the last 6 months, has been having perpetual hard drive failures. A year or so ago, we replaced the motherboard in it already, so it didn't, and it's also recommended from Dominion Tech, based on its age and operating system is such that it should be upgraded as well. So long and short of it, we'd like to pull the roughly $2,200 out of the technology fund to purchase a new laptop for Sharon for clerk treasurer.
Yeah. And then the number 3 is the authorized signer for the ANR SRF payments. This is an older loan that we had used for the water line inventory. Valerie was a signer as well as Anthony when he was here as treasurer. And so I just like to update that to have it be the treasurer, current treasurer at Sharon Lucia. And this is mainly to close out and to get our final payment for that project. I had previously submitted it. It was then flagged and came back that I wasn't an official signer on it and we needed to update that. So I'd just like to change that. And then the 4th thing was we got an update from Pat Travers, who's our project manager for Basin Street. And he has told us that Basin Street is currently in the National Environmental Protection Act review. Question arose regarding the potential historic significance of the old concrete retaining walls and railings along Basin Street and the concrete drainage structure that runs through the open parcel below Main Street. The VTrans Historic Preservation Officer does not feel that those features are eligible for historic preservation. However, this must be documented by a consulting archaeologist. Chris Ratha, who's our design engineer at Going King, he reached out to the UVM Consulting Archaeological Program, UVM CAP, to get a quote and declaring the retaining wall, railing, and draining structure not historically significant. UVM CAP has provided an upper limit quotation of $1,564 to develop that report. And that was in your packets as well.
Wonderful.
So that would be for that. It's recommended, if we don't do it, we could potentially drag the project out a little bit longer. And I spoke with Frida about it, and she recommends doing it. She says we don't want the project.
No.
It's
You actually, it's a requirement of the existing funding that is secured for that underfunded project, has that as a requirement. So you have to do that to cover your butts, for, just in case they find something old.
Exactly. Thank you, Frida. So that's it.
So the only question I have is, it's treasurer's appointment. You mentioned clerk too. Are we appointing both?
No.
No, it was just it was sort of matching up.
It
her-
aligns- it
Yes,
aligns with
exactly,
it?
yeah,
Okay.
Oh, Sharon's already the clerk and she's
Correct.
through with the 27th. So we're gonna not make this a 1-year treasure, we're gonna make it a 2-year.
correct. And then that would match up.
Okay.
So they match up in terms of approving her again if she's still performing those duties.
All right.
We'll make a motion that we
Well,
approve.
you've already made the motion.
Oh, we gotta, yeah, we didn't make, I made a motion on what was here, not,
The consent agenda, yeah.
but not, I was gonna do a notion to make it to March 27th.
That's what
Yeah,
that's what
that was
it
it.
is.
Okay,
He
Yeah.
just filled us in on what. the
Yeah.
Right.
appointment
Right.
was.
If you want to amend your motion to say that, that's totally.
right, because it wasn't here the first time.
Correct. I explained that we.
Right, you now
yeah,
explained it.
It wasn't in here. That's correct.
Okay.
I wanted to have a
Make it,
discussion.
I
yeah.
changed my motion to have it concealed, go through March of 2027.
Perfect. Thank you. Second.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm here.
Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Regular business. Consider appointment. To fill energy committee vacancy. Dan Batter?
It's actually Batten.
Batten?
Instead of
Okay,
Batter,
I'm-
it's
I'm-
down. That's all right.
Wait, did I get that wrong? Oh, dear, I'm terribly sorry about
Oh,
that.
it's an N, not an R?
It's an N, yeah.
Whoa.
My poor copying and pasting.
Yeah, we're gonna get rid of our interim manager or administrator.
Everybody's had something taken out of their head, right? So,
All right.
Alrighty.
So Dan emailed with interest in serving on the energy committee, and I invited him to join us for a interview.
Why would
And we
we
have
like this position?
Well, first of all, I know that there's spaces open, so that
Right.
always helps.
That does help.
Not a whole lot of competition for the open spaces, so, but, I feel, I've been involved, well, I should introduce myself a little bit. I live in Bristol Village Co-housing right across the street. And my wife and daughter and I have lived here since 2018, so hard to believe 7 years already. I've been volunteering for lots of energy, environmental, climate organizations and initiatives everywhere in Vermont and around, but not in Bristol. For some reason, I haven't been doing anything right in town. And it feels like right now in this day and age, it's kind of important to be acting local. And I've known Sally Burrell for some time on the Energy Committee, and she's gently nudged me in this direction for a while, and I feel like I'm a good addition. I do most of my volunteering is kind of behind the scenes kind of work. I'm a senior technical writer at National Life Group in Montpelier, so I've been a writer, do a lot of computer stuff. I'm familiar with building websites and email campaigns and social media stuff and running Zoom meetings and doing all that fun stuff. So creating flyers and posters and all that. So I have the feeling that there's a need for that and the energy team. So I'd just like to be able to.
Do you have any background in the energy consulting area?
I wish I did, but I don't. As a technical writer, I love to read all of this kind of dense stuff because I just like to learn, but not so much.
And was this would have been advertised on our social media, Front Porch Forum, or just?
It's been out there. I can't remember. Did you hear about it from Sally or?
First, probably Sally, but I've also attended the meetings, so that's been part of their agenda for a while now, finding new members.
Yeah. we currently have 2 terms that are open on the Energy Committee. They're both 3 years. They both expire or end of March 2028.
And those 2 terms aren't filled, or they're filled presently? Do
They're
they
not
want-
filled. They're both 2 vacant positions.
Oh, 2
Yeah.
vacant positions, okay. Did any of the who are coming up, they want to stay on?
Yes.
All of them have been into.
We had one person step off after a number of years, and but the rest continued. Yeah.
I'd entertain a motion.
Any other questions?
I don't have any.
I make a motion to approve Dan Batten for the Bristol Energy Committee
Second.
A motion and a second.
for a 3-year term.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Motion carried. My condolences.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bristol Accessible Parks Project, presentation by Dan from Du Bois and King.
He's on.
Good evening, all.
I didn't want to butcher your last name, Dan, that's why I skipped it.
Thanks, Don. It's Malik.
Malik, okay.
Dan Malik, members of the select board, other participants, members of the public, thanks. Yes, my name's Dan Malik. I'm over here in Randolph. I'm a landscape architect, certified planner with Du Bois and King over here, resident of Braintree, just a couple of hills away from you. And it's been my privilege to work for a little less than a year on this Accessible Designs for Town Parks project. And this evening, I'll be sharing my screen here. Hopefully you can all see that cover and stepping through aspects of the report, our background research, what instigated the project, how it developed, the 3 parks that we explored, some of the public process that went into preparing then plans, and I'll review those. We have both concepts as well as a set of construction type drawings that would then be taken on by perhaps a design build firm to do the work. But we also talk about some of the legwork that would be required to both fund and permit that process moving forward. And a big part of all this is naturally maintenance and accessibility, meaning lots of things to different people. So chime in by all means at any time, ask any questions. I'm here at your pleasure to present the final report and results of our work. I also have a Google Earth software up and running and the A&R Atlas going. If we'd like to look at all adjacent properties or anything else about these 3 parks, we can switch over to that screen as well.
Okay.
I like to just stop at the table of contents so you can kind of get a breadth of the project and the full report and what we did in terms of background and looking at existing conditions at each of the 3 parks under consideration, Eagle Park, Memorial Park, and Sycamore Park. How we thought about design development, again, going back to what accessibility means to different people, with a focus on physical accessibility. And that was the real genesis of this project. But we recognize people engage with their environment different ways, have different mental, emotional ways of sensitivities, if you will, of engaging with spaces. And we want to bring all residents and visitors to Bristol opportunities to enjoy these parks. And community input, and then I mentioned the plans. And we also did in this report a real deep dive into accessible signage, especially everything from fonts to color combinations to contrast to construction, what makes wayfinding possible for different types of people with different types of needs. And that whole implementation section, including some cost estimates, is to really help Bristol take it from here into the next steps and understand what might be involved. Like to thank certainly the steering committee that was involved throughout the project. And a lot of this work would not have been possible were it not for Porter's initiative and energy. And she came before the select board later in 2023 with a request and a presentation of her own that funds from ARPA be allocated for the purposes of this project and to help move what had been a real high level idea and wish list of the community forward with a lot greater specificity and understanding of what would be required. And that's what this report's about. But certainly Kristen and Jonna were very involved throughout. Amy, a lot of great energy and ideas on a personal level and from personal experience in the subject matter. Valerie, of course, was with us the whole way and still always in spirit. And Meredith and Aiden as well in the recreation department, and Eric, a lot of great ideas about parking, maintenance, right of way, and any number of, on the ground truthing, if you will, throughout the project. That photograph is a beautiful one from probably January of 2024 at Memorial Park. And we'll talk a little more about Memorial Park, but some beautiful hemlocks right there, not too far from the parking area off of 17. Also a picture from Memorial Park. So I already gave you a little bit of background, but those 4 pluses there I thought are worthwhile reviewing briefly. Connect with the people of diverse abilities. And so not only to get them out to these spaces, but also throughout the course of the project to connect with people and get insights of the users that we're trying to reach. Understand the barriers to use and enjoyment and what some of us might not think twice about. Other people see either as a physical barrier or, certain activities, times a day, noises might be a different kind of barrier. It's just worth thinking about. So shape a high level vision, work with the Conservation Commission, understand the ecology of each park, understand some of the challenges, certainly around flooding of the New Haven River at both Eagle and Sycamore Parks, understanding the challenge that knotweed is posing, especially accessing the river at Sycamore Park in particular, and the maintenance issues around that, and then develop detailed plans. Prior work, the Conservation Commission, if you haven't had the opportunity to at least look through them, October 2023, they prepared across the top there, 1, 2, 3, excellent management plans for each park. Talking about current use, potential future use, issues in terms of maintenance, and what have you. Excellent documents, and particularly that one for Sycamore Park. A lot of wonderful pictures about the history of that area, Palmer's Court, the 1998 floods. It was after 1998 and the flooding of that summer that both Eagle and Sycamore Park, through FEMA buyouts, became town property. The Vermont Healthy Communities survey, which we'll talk about briefly, and number 5 there is part of the presentation that Porter Knight gave to the Select Board back in 2023. You see some photographs here, the Eagle Park site, cabin and store after the 1998 flood, Memorial Park. And that park, interestingly enough, was created, I believe, in the 50s. There's more about that in here, in part to be a town forest. And I haven't yet been able to find information about the town forest in terms of, town forests are established in part to selectively cut. Now we know how to do good forestry nowadays, but they're in part a town woodlot. And I don't know if it's been used as such since then. I'd be interested to go back into the archives and find some of the original documentation around the creation of that space. But that was part of its original use when those 19 plus acres were set aside. And on the right there, a picture from the flooding there at Palmer's Court, the manufactured home community, and the flooding in 1998. I think it also worth mentioning at this time and keeping on everyone's radar, the ash borer. Each of the sites, well, less so Memorial Park, which has more of a conifer and upland ecology, but certainly at Eagle and quite a bit at Sycamore Park, quite a few ash trees. And every community takes different management approaches to its ash. And I think the Emerald Ash Borer Strategic Plan, right now still in draft form from 2021, but it was put together back then by a committee, did a fantastic job laying out the pros and cons of whether it's injections of iconic ash trees in certain locations, how to approach trees that may be near trails or public ways, or how to sometimes live and let live when something's a little further into the woods. There are a combination of approaches. That health equity and community design technical assistance pilot that I mentioned earlier ran a survey, and based on my visits to the farmers markets on a couple of Mondays last summer, as well as my time at the Pocock Rocks Festival, this kind of jives with what I heard. And actually, this is a little better sometimes than what I've heard about park usage, and that most folks who had used one of the parks, it was usually either Sycamore or Eagle Park that I spoke with. Some knew of Memorial Park, but a lot of folks confused it with the memorial site across the street, which was interesting with the flags. And Orton, yeah, and other parks, you know, various usages, particularly I would suppose the town green. These are images from Porter's presentation of what a potential Eagle Park could look like. This was really food for thought to get the imaginative juices flowing. This wasn't a plan per se, but some really great illustrations of the type of activity and diverse uses. And we did build on this, in particular, some of the ideas around parking, and certainly our vision for this Eagle Park matches the high activity level at certain times, shown in these great illustrations. It's a picture of Sycamore Park. That is Japanese knotweed in flower, in case you don't recognize it. And I think I also see some honeysuckle. Also Sycamore Park, either stalks, cedars there, wonderful spot. So Eagle Park, around 5.5 acres. Just for reference, the Bristol Town Green is 1.5 acres. So if you have kind of that space, including the playground, if you have that space in your head, 5.5 acres in this shape, you know, about 5 of it a little more usable. The parking right there off the Lincoln Road where my hand is now, kind of an unregulated parking area in terms of there aren't stripes, and sometimes you can achieve efficiencies of design if you put some sort of striping down or somewhat more formalized. But from what we've heard, the current use doesn't necessarily require that. But if we're anticipating that these parks will be used more by a more diverse group of people, the plans that we've prepared do show where accessible parking spaces, handicap parking spaces could be located and signed. So some pictures down below of the existing condition, that bit of concrete from a gravel path going to the accessible fishing pier. After a couple of washouts of the path, that concrete was put down and seems to be doing a good job. I know this group has had some discussion about the pier and how to try to prevent debris from building up on that fencing there. This is Memorial Park, just over 19 acres. And again, in part conceived as a town forest in addition to a memorial to soldiers. And you see the main parking area right here off of Route 17. That's the Baldwin Creek, that area that's kind of blank, if you will, without the blue. And so mostly what's accessible now is this upper smaller portion. You're familiar with the bridge that has traditionally spanned the Baldwin Creek. The bridge structure is in place, but it is, and I know the Recreation Department is continuously putting up barrier tape, because there was a study done a few years back finding that the bridge structure is not structurally sound for the kind of traffic that it was intended to carry. So getting to the rear portion, you see this line of a road here. The very beginning of it off 17 is through a separate parcel, the Osmond parcel, and then it goes on town land for most of it. And then there's a landlocked parcel toward the back. This Michael Kane has an easement along that area, but throughout the course of the project, a lot of the great energy and ideas were about the majority of the site that is generally unused, especially now that the bridge is no longer available for use. What a great resource that the town has to be able to potentially use this side. And so you'll see that a lot of the plans we have, in addition to improving what's available right off Route 17, is thinking about what might be possible as well on the south side of Baldwin Creek. And then the third park that we looked at, also on New Haven River, Sycamore Park South on 116. This bridge, when it was redone a few years back, the state acquired some land. That's kind of the trapezoid that I'm outlining there. That's actually where the parking for the park is right now. But otherwise, some beautiful, relatively flat, open areas. Some wonderful floodplain forest right along New Haven River. There's some barbecue areas close to the river, and some nice cobble shores, fairly difficult to get to for a couple reasons. First, this is frequently inundated, and even the dirt paths are sometimes hummocked and cracked, and also frequently obscured by Japanese knotweed, which grows very quickly. You know, some of it's manageable, but I should say that in 1998, when both Eagle and Sycamore were bought out with FEMA's help, certain restrictions were put on what could be done within base flood elevation +1 foot, which is most of the park. And now that doesn't restrict putting park-related things on it, but you can't put enclosed buildings. And whatever you do put on, be it a sign or a picnic table, needs to be anchored in some way and of materials that are relatively flood-proofed. Now, this is just basic public safety. We don't want anything washing away into the debris stream, and we also, in terms of doing damage, but we also don't want materials such as asphalt, oil, petroleum-based products washing into the river. And so throughout the course of this project, we kept in touch with Kyle Medash, who is your district floodplain manager in Addison County, and he had some good thoughts about how to build potentially at Sycamore Park, and we'll show what we settled on. I would also say that Aiden in the recreation department had excellent feedback as well about materials, and again, particularly about asphalt and path material. So grateful for all of that. Pictures along the bottom, the entranceway park to the park, some of the beautiful open areas. And there's some of the cobble beach that you see with a bit of a breakwater. We're visiting one day with some folks from the town. There's a family swimming because the water slows down right there quite a bit. It's really quite a nice spot. Topography, we always have to look at when we're thinking accessibility. I'm not sure how much folks are used to reading these kinds of lines, but in Scouts, we got to know lines that are closer together are steeper slopes. And so up in Memorial Park, very steep down to Baldwin Creek from both the north side and the south side. The parking area there, relatively flat, but it is a little tilted. So we're going to recommend that be addressed if that parking area were to be fixed up. Eagle Park, you see again, relatively flat, a little steepness coming off of Lincoln Road, but relatively flat. A little bit of pitch down into New Haven River. Sycamore Park, as I mentioned, by and large, almost all fairly flat. Now, flat in terms of accessibility is a good thing. Flat in terms of potential flooding, not so much, because you can imagine that when the New Haven does move up and rise, even just a couple feet of rise of the New Haven means almost the entirety of the park can be inundated. So what is accessibility? I bet if we asked all of you, you might think different things in terms of ADA requirements. But generally, we took some of the ADA requirements. A lot of them have to do with slope of a path. You know, some of those are the most critical when it comes to a project like this. Some of them have to do with parking that is as close to the amenities as possible. So we also took that to heart. We broadened the definition, as I mentioned, recognizing that even coming to one of these spaces, even if it's getting to the parking lot off Memorial and hearing the falls and having some of that cool water spray and smelling the hemlocks, that's a kind of accessibility. Also recognizing that accessibility often starts at home. A caregiver or someone with certain physical needs, sometimes it's just getting in the car is an operation, if you will, and knowing what's at these parks. So we'd encourage Bristol, should any of these go forward, or even based on current conditions, just telling people what they can expect in terms of parking and access and amenities once they show up. Even what's the busiest time of day for folks that would prefer things at a quieter time of day. So that's an important aspect of accessibility, which we talked to a lot of people at the farmers markets and about Pocock Rocks, about what it would take to get them to the sites. And accessibility for a wheelchair, we often think of in terms of the American with Disabilities Act. But I heard a lot of folks that said, I'd love it if I could even push a stroller from a parking area throughout this park. So those kinds of wheels as well, or a walker or a cane, what have you. Even someone simply recovering from surgery who's a little unsteady on their feet, but would find it real healthy to go to one of these parks. That's accessibility as well as certain kinds of visual and audio impairments. Universal design kind of speaks as a term that speaks to planning and designing beyond the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's also, quite frankly, recognizing that we can't do everything at every site. We can't have ramps down to the Baldwin Creek, concrete ramps with railings, both in terms of construction, cost, and ecology. And so we have to also realize what's possible, recognizing that doing something is better than doing nothing, bringing people closer to the water, whether it's to see it or smell it, if not touch it, is a move forward for the project. And in that, our communication and work with Vermont Adaptive was particularly useful because this is what they do. It's a fantastic organization. I'm sure many of you are familiar with it. I'm working actually on another project in Barry City right now, trying to improve accessibility to the waterways through the city, many of which have been hidden behind granite sheds and other buildings and what have you. And Vermont Adaptive's involved in that as well. But recognizing that accessibility exists on a spectrum, mental, emotional, and physical, and there's no one size fits all solution. And saying yes to park users, oftentimes we see signs that say no this, no that, no skateboarding, no fishing, no swimming. Let's find opportunities to say yes. And certainly fishing, we do want to encourage. I had a great talk with a fellow at Pocock Rocks for about 15 minutes about where the best brookie habitat is along the New Haven River. Create year-round accessibility. Certainly that's very important. And engage people of all abilities and perspectives in the maintenance and programming of recreation. I spoke with a gentleman who actually helped build some of the trails at Sycamore Park back in the day. And there's a lot of interest in that from the Boy Scouts on up. And promoting access to simple equipment. It doesn't have to be fancy. We don't need to be overly prescriptive. And hiking poles and snowshoes. I believe there might be a lending library of sorts in Bristol. Yeah. Is that, Ian, is that at the library itself or is that housed elsewhere?
Yeah, it's at the library. I
Yeah.
believe the recreation department has some equipment as well.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Let's continue to promote that and continually assess results. Talk to users, post-occupancy or post-construction checks are really important. And that's especially true if through funding and trying to build up, we can't necessarily do all this at once, nor necessarily do we want to. Sometimes we want to try a pilot project for a few weeks, see how it goes, ask people, and then build from there and take the short, medium, and long view. I mentioned the floodway restrictions and planning. I already summarized them somewhat in terms of the 1998 buyouts of Sycamore and Eagle Parks. I do recommend that working with Kyle Medash, the district floodplain manager, and others will be excellent moving forward, just to make sure that current conditions and requirements are being met moving forward. The report, however, does show a few ideas, as I mentioned, for anchoring in terms of bolting brackets or chain or embedding. These three options shown on here are all acceptable ways of anchoring amenities within the floodplain base flood elevation +1 per the FEMA buyout requirements. So community input, this is a picture of our table at Pocock Rocks. And if I may just say, personally, professionally, the 5 hours of this event were incredibly gratifying. I had a profoundly wonderful time talking with folks at this event. And yes, not all of it was strictly about this project. Yes, it was about brook trout and other things. But this not only did the project a great service in the amount of information that we got, it was just a really, I think, important way to get the message out that Bristol cares about this kind of work. And just that day or the day before, the article came out in the Addison Independent about the project as well. And so the timing was good. Some folks had already read that article before showing up at the table. And if I may, I'm going to reach back out to Bristol Core. I think it would be useful. I'd be very happy to spend another afternoon talking with folks, showing the results of this project, because this was done back in August and we just had concept plans there, you see in the middle, for folks to talk about. I think it'd be wonderful. Be happy to do it. This is officially this evening the completion of our project scope per our original proposal and contract, but I'd love to get back out there and talk to folks about this project. In the steering committee, we came up with kind of an elevator pitch, if you will, of what is this project. So the members of the steering committee and others that were aware of it could tell people, hey, you know, what's going on with this Accessible Parks project? And these 3 items here on the left-hand panel, assess existing conditions, create concept plans, and develop detailed site drawings. That's essentially it. And as well as introducing the fact that there are these 3 wonderful parks along waterways in Bristol that are generally underused, especially by people with accessibility needs. Here's again some of the posters that we saw at Pocock Rocks. And so I asked people, you know, what do they enjoy or what would they like to see at these parks? And it's a lot of good information, quite frankly, for the entire community, for all of its outdoor recreation spaces, because people did talk a little bit about trails and foraging and work that might end up elsewhere throughout the town. There were people that would like to see that bridge at Memorial Park restored, and they asked about that. There was study, and a company did prepare a report as to what it would take. It was just deemed at that time cost prohibitive to restore that bridge into working condition. And so we could put that in the hopper down the road, but for the purposes of this project, we were trying to find, okay, if that's not going to happen in the near or even medium term, what other opportunities can we explore? And in the lower poster, we laid out lots of different options for accessible amenities that people could enjoy at these parks. And certainly you see here, the first one, parking, very much accessible paths, and people voted by putting a sticker, however many stickers they wanted on however many of these amenities, what they supported. And some things like an accessible picnic table, which you see with the extension there on the right that would accommodate a wheelchair. They might not have received a lot of stickers compared to some other things, but these are basic design elements that if you're going to buy a picnic table for these parks, why not make it such that it would accommodate a chair and position it such relative to a path or flat surface that someone could roll right up to it. Our time at the farmers markets and some of the feedback we received, 27 people, 34 people on dates in July and August, including a lot of vendors, a lot of people very generous with their time. And we learned a lot of good things, that signage very important. This is where I heard from several people that using a stroller at these parks will bring more people to the parks, which is ultimately the goal. Support for diverse sign types, including potentially with Braille text. And that there doesn't need to be a lot there. Just allow people to get there, to know what's there, hold informal classes like yoga there. And ultimately, and I know this is a vision for some of the folks on the select board, having them, at least some of them anyway, bicycle accessible. And I know particularly Sycamore Park might be a focus of that effort coming down 116 from the village. Before I hop into the plans, any questions about existing conditions, the project, the public engagement portion?
No, you've been incredibly thorough.
Thanks. Thank you. So plan development, preliminary concept plans, which we then revised based on feedback of the steering committee as well as the engineer that worked on this project. I did not do this alone, thank goodness. One of the engineers at Du Bois and King, Matt Mears, was with us, as well as two of my colleagues who are landscape designers, all working on this project. We went out with Matt with the concept plans in hand, and he said, well, we should really route this path this way to take better advantage of existing conditions. That kind of thing. Well, why don't we head over, in this direction? Very useful. And then he and his team prepared the site improvements plan, the line work, the CAD work, which I'll share toward the end because there are lots of details in there that someone could go out with and bid on a project and move it forward. And then that we took those same line work plans done in AutoCAD and created a final illustration of the type that could be used at each of the parks as your map when someone shows up at the kiosk. So Eagle Park, generally we wanted to look at the desire line, see how people walked around the parks now, and tried to create a path system that built upon that. Certainly anyone can go off path, but sometimes, certainly during wet conditions, it's useful to keep people on a certain path so as to not to muddy other areas. And in this first plan, these we developed in July and early August of last year. We started to think about different parking and where including accessible parking could be. There's a gate here for maintenance off of Lincoln Road because actually the flattest part coming onto the main part of the site is over here where my hand is. So we're thinking, well, could we put accessible parking spaces there? This was our first thought about how to get someone who is being driven and uses a chair straight into the property. As we developed this a little further, we got rid of that parking area because simply the circulation and having a second entrance off of Lincoln Road wasn't deemed safe at all. And so we did, you see the two gray areas here, put two accessible parking spaces and got the grading right so we could come right off of them, go to the fishing pier and throughout the park system as well. And so while initially we were looking at asphalt, for what you see there is blue back in there, you see asphalt or gravel. Ultimately, as I mentioned, both talking with Kyle Medash as well as the feedback from Aiden in the recreation department, we did just land on the gravel as well as reinforced grass, and we'll show you some details of the reinforced grass just a little later, as well as what the accessible parking spaces could look like. And there's the more finalized plan with the line work. The darker gray is reinforced gravel and the sort of the stippled white in the middle is reinforced grass. So if you're not familiar with the reinforcement, it's basically a concrete, or in this case, plastic grid that is embedded and anchored into the ground, and then either grass seed is then going to grow up to it, through it, or in the case of the gravel put in the voids and up above. So and during a washout situation, there is far less damage when you have these cells, if you will, holding the material and the substrate in place. And what you don't have is asphalt. And when you have an asphalt path, it just starts to get undermined with inundation, and then it starts to break away. And so you not only have a safety issue that would be costly to address, and forgive me, the lights are on timers and they just go off if I'm not moving enough. But you also have something that's relatively easy to repair in the case of this, in terms of shoveling gravel back in and get back up and running in no time. And you also don't have that petroleum product potentially washing back into the water. Here you see where 2 accessible parking spaces could go with signage. You see a bicycle rack. You also see some plantings being restored. There were some flower shrubs along this bank at Eagle Park that we heard from a lot of folks that they'd like restored there, so we show those as well. We are showing striping, but we're also, but the only actual area which we think we could reasonably put down some type of lane marking is for the accessible paths. What we did just try to do is create a much more regularized shape that's familiar with people for parking and more efficiently fitting in the cars by putting in the curb wheel stops at the front to delineate parking. But the rest of this is still compacted dirt gravel as it is now. And there's the illustrated plan. We're also showing on this directional signage throughout the park. There's the fishing pier. And as this could be a map that's put up on a kiosk, you see up here in brown, that's actually the braille for Eagle Park that you have there. And what we're also trying to convey through the signage and the different types of surfaces is how easy it is for someone to get from A to B. Very easy, relatively easy on packed gravel or packed grass or the reinforced grass, a little more challenging on dirt. A memorial park. Right now, we would want to reconfigure the parking. The large innovation in discussing with the town on our site visit altogether was that right now there are 2 entrances. There's sort of, but which is an exit, which is an entrance. They're both exits and entrances. In terms of site distance, putting a single entrance right here seemed the safest and most logical answer to organizing the parking at this location, and then realizing much greater efficiency of the parking if we have face in. We wanted a kind of landing area right off of the parking so someone could go directly from parking right to an area where they could hear and experience the falls to some extent without having to go further down. At the same time, we started to explore, and this is still in the concept plan stage, what a south side could look like in terms of overlooks and parking and other ideas. We're also thinking about accessible restrooms and talking with the recreation department and maintenance. That doesn't seem possible right now in terms of the regular upkeep of an accessible restroom. There is the portalet at Sycamore Park that's put in there seasonally, but beyond that, there isn't currently budget or capacity to maintain anything else. But we're thinking about it and getting people's ideas. As the plan developed, we started to think a little more about the parking configuration, where accessible spaces could go. There is an existing rough staircase getting down to a flattish grass area right here. That could be improved. This project didn't take the deep dive into what it would take to completely remove and replace those stairs. Right now, we wouldn't consider them entirely up to code in terms of railings. And so getting them that far, once we kind of peel back that layer as designers and engineers, we are obligated essentially to go all the way. But there is a nice grassy area just down below that, should the town choose to improve these and put them up to code, is a really enjoyable area that would enhance the north side improvements. And this is where we start thinking about the accessible overlook deck, which we explored further. And there's that accessible overlook deck there. There's some parking spaces. These are actually located based on our site observations of where there aren't trees and where there's relatively flat area adjacent to that dirt road coming in off of 17. We show benches and plants and picnic tables and the existing path to remain and that entrance with the much better sight distance off of 17. And the illustrated version of the same with wayfinding signage and recognition that the dirt or sort of stair path would be more challenging. This on the south side, gravel, and there's actually a very nice overlook opportunity here. Now, if you were to continue here, that's kind of where you get the bridge. If someday that were to be reconstructed, the path to this nice overlook, very nice overlook of the falls and the water, could simply be continued. So that's placed with that in mind. Sycamore Park, here's the concept plan that we put in front of folks at Pocock Rocks, thinking about different ideas from adaptive gardening, which I think is a fantastic idea. Less interest on that sticker board that I showed you for the fitness options. Seem like if someone's going to the park just to enjoy the outdoors, they're less interested perhaps in using this kind of equipment. There are also long-term maintenance concerns about equipment like this. If they were to break, it's very difficult to repair because they're kind of proprietary technologies. There is the more advanced version based on the feedback of our engineers. And up at the top, you see a more refined parking area. Again, that red is the state land that I mentioned that they acquired when they redid the bridge. And a nice grassy margin closer to the river. Again, someone could get right out of a car and get right next to the water. And a path through that floodplain forest, because that's really a great asset there. There's the more finalized design work, and then the illustrated version of the refined design work. Any question about any of the plans before we just go through some of the details briefly?
I had a question. So for the memorial, in your initial slides, they talked about that south side entrance. It's actually land owned by somebody else. Are there any issues in terms of right of way to actually use that as a more accessible entrance to get to this new design?
We have it right away.
Okay.
Thought we did.
Okay.
That was, wasn't that who's the guy that lives up on top of the hill?
Mike Kane?
Orvis is the one that owned that, because I remember Mike Kane was fighting with him about getting access.
Well, Mike Kane and Orvis, I think both have access because I think there was a fight between the two of them. But we only have access up to a certain point, if I remember right, don't we?
Access to our land. You go onto our property once you get in there a little ways.
Yeah.
It's just a small portion of it that's on Orvis's.
Okay.
So there's
I see.
memorial. Can you all see that? And so, yeah, there's the bit there.
That's the
There's,
playground.
there's the property line.
Okay.
And the blue, that's town, and then that's Mike Kane's property.
Okay.
Yeah.
No issues with that. Okay, great.
No, because Mike wanted to use our right of way and Orvis said no. It was quite a long drawn out battle, but I guess Mike's still living up there, so he must have got access.
The question moving forward is where the turnaround might be before it gets onto Mike Kane's property. And so you would need to create some sort of larger circle down toward the lower left of the plan that we're looking at. So if someone were to park here parallel, or, it'd be a little more challenging to actually do a 3-point turn.
Yeah.
So continuing westward, getting to a kind of bulb and coming back out again would be necessary.
Okay.
Or at least preferred.
Any other
Yeah,
questions?
there was a parking spot, like 2 parking spots on the south side of the road at one point. That's where you used to turn around.
Thanks. And so we might have seen evidence of that in terms of the clearing, and that's where we put a couple of those parking spaces. And it could be that we just start with the 3 there that get to the overlook deck and include others as turnaround, and depending on demand or desire, modify that over time. There was evidence definitely that south side was used a lot more. We saw, who knows, from the 50s or 60s, an old outhouse up in the woods and somewhat overgrown. So there is some history of use back in there. And I don't know if, again, it was scouts that would camp there or what have you.
I know that for a while, when the Lions Club became active, they would go up and pick the trash up and lime the outhouses. That was that was a long time ago. It was 80s.
Probably more recent than the 50s or 60s then, certainly, John. Yeah. Huh, that's good to hear. Any other thoughts or questions about the plans portion? So design details, here you see some of the stabilized aggregate surface of accessible parking spaces. It's also possible to put colored pins down, even reflective discs to delineate parking spaces on the gravel portion. But at the very least, curb stops with a standard reserved parking for wheelchair use or accessible use would delineate those spaces very well. And in the full plan set, we include all the details of stabilized aggregate stone and how that can be constructed. The path surfacing, however, when you get a little closer down toward the water, you see this true grid stabilized grass system, either closer to the water or that secondary interior path system at Eagle Park. That's where you again have a plastic grid system. Grass grows right up through. So this is fully wheelchair accessible. This is fully mowable for equipment as well, but it offers that hardened surface that's of course much easier to get a wheelchair across. And there is some, with heavy inundation, there's some undermining of soil that can take place here, but it is much easier to repair and fix and knock in place and get parts. You can even do a sample test area of this kind of thing. You can get the grid system and certain sections of it, a 10 by 20 section, relatively easily, and start putting sections down as a test in various areas and see how it goes, over the course of several months or a winter, or, I'm sure we're not going to get any kind of flooding like we have the last couple of years, but should that happen, you could have something in place to be able to test it. Getting even closer down, and this is a picture of Sycamore Park, keeping the dirt is the only viable option, getting all the way closer to those cobble beaches, because this really does get inundated and lifted up and hummocked so much. Even doing something like that grid wouldn't really be possible. Again, you could test a very short section for a couple $100 of materials and grass seed and see how it goes. But based on our understanding of the history of that area, what we did try to show in the plans is the area that is currently clear, relatively clear, and relatively flat compared to all the other weaving routes that access the New Haven.
So with the true grid stuff for a sycamore, you're saying it's not recommended as you get closer to the water. Is that purely because of the knotweed?
The knotweed plus, as I just described, that surface as you get so much closer is in constant state of motion.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Yeah. Whether it's freeze thaw this time of year, but especially just getting washed out and rutted, and it just didn't seem feasible. And so in this, the gravel would be the blue, the reinforced gravel, the reinforced grass would be the yellow. And these two routes really are the most viable to get to the water, but they can be improved, they can be cleared, they can be raked, they can be maintained in as good a condition as possible, but installing any kind of grid system just didn't seem reasonable.
What about the control of the knotweed? I know going through there, you're sort of hacking through like Indiana Jones sometimes. is that, I know it's very difficult to get rid of, but what are your recommendations for control of that, if there's any control?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. There is over the long term with diligence, and that involves repeated cutting throughout the year. And it seems that, and I just went to a talk here in Randolph from a fellow Mike Bald, who has a business, Got Weeds, ? And his approach is a chemical-free invasives control, and that is challenging. But with repeated cutting, what you're doing is you're tiring out the rhizome system by which the knotweed spreads. And it seems that knotweed does not propagate so much by seed. There are a lot of plants where the seeds remain viable in the soil for 5, 10, 15 years. That doesn't seem to be the case with knotweed. And so with cutting and smothering with tarpaulin and then, a foot or so of soil, that over time can really knock this back. I mean, you kind of have to start yesterday, but if not yesterday, then why not tomorrow? So it can be done.
Chris?
Aiden's been working very heavily on trying to figure out an outreach control. He's met with, he's been in contact with a handful of folks, so.
Okay. Yeah.
That's excellent. And that's why you also kind of pick your battles, and having a plan like this is useful in terms of we can't do it all. So what are our priorities? And hopefully a plan like this can help set the priorities as to where to focus efforts. Because if you just look at the entire park or your whole backyard, if it's an issue, it can be pretty overwhelming. So what I would recommend is even putting a string a couple feet in, or just enough on each side of the path to create maybe a 5-foot wide swath. And if you can just maintain up to, poles with a string, just maintain that and make that your focus, that would be a victory. And, someday maybe there'll be a safe biological control of Japanese knotweed. Friend of mine here is looking how to make pie out of the shoots. Apparently it's similar to a rhubarb pie. If we can develop the market for that, who knows how far we can go. But in the meantime, setting expectations, is the best way to go. But there are controls.
Okay.
It's probably the most challenging invasive in the state. By a pretty good margin. Chervil and parsnip are up there too. But in terms of its proximity to waterways and its ability to travel with just the smallest little cutting of that rhizome down the ditches, by a plow, through no fault, of course, of the highway department or anyone else. It's just how this plant operates. It's got a pretty aggressive life strategy, and it's taken advantage of the flooding as well. A lot of areas weren't that prevalent of knotweed before Irene. But so many of them just washed down the waterways from a few selected patches and started moving from there. We looked a lot about signs, and I'd encourage you to take a little more time if you'd like in the report, but visibility, legibility, clear messaging, and strategic placement are the major principles, as you can imagine, of good signage, whether it's traffic control signage or wayfinding signs on the trails. That's the same is true here. Placement, anchoring, if in the floodway, and certainly to the extent possible, sustainable materials, wood, something that would sit gracefully, within the park settings themselves, and if possible, in some cases, braille. Certainly, someone needs to know the sign is there and have an expectation of wanting to find it. But in an effort to be accessible to all, braille as well as audio are options for signage. And so this material is there for moving forward and getting ideas when it comes to making signs, or replacing existing signs, or creating kiosks. This idea of a tactile map, like the one on the upper right, is not only visually interesting, it can be done by a local craftsperson, but it can also convey information to someone with low vision in a way that's interesting and exciting. They're also made in the handheld sizes, and that could be a fun project for someone as well, to be able to navigate, for example, around Sycamore Park simply by being able to feel their way around the path system. We have a little more here about the technology that could go into signs, whether it's QR codes, where there's cell service, learning a little more about the ecology and the maintenance of, let's say there is a knotweed eradication or control project. So someone can learn what's going on and perhaps learn something to be able to do on their own property. There are also audible signages and signs and telling about a park. Some of it immediately turns on when it's motion activated. Some of it is button activated. But again, you have that issue of having to be able to see the button as opposed to the sign always talking to you, which some people, when they're going out in nature, don't want that kind of experience. We looked into these simply to be more accessible to people who are still learning words and putting words together. These are an interesting idea, these communication boards. It would be interesting perhaps to try one at one of these parks to allow individuals who are, still learning and trying to communicate or simply communicate differently, be able to do so. Typography and color, as you can imagine, any of you in the design field, and I know some of you are, vital. Finding color combinations that for people with a color deficiency can still read a sign. And all those illustrated plans we did, we chose brown, yellow, and blue for a reason, because people with, let's say, red, green deficiency, which is particularly common, could still read those different path types. And there are various interesting softwares out there, like this one from Vinage, that can come up with complementary color combinations that create contrast. Typography and font within typography is vital. Turns out folks have a hard time reading all caps. No surprise, especially if it's sometimes at a distance, the eye just doesn't always compute. So picking a font with the right combination is vital. And so here are some guides, simply what size font is necessary to read it at 6 feet. Fortunately, other people have already figured a lot of this out, but we include this in this report for Bristol's benefit. Same, we already discussed this kind of picnic table and other kinds of benches. It might have been part of that Barry project where someone said, we always think a bench should have 2 arms, one on each side, to help people sit down. And that's certainly the case, or stand up. But having a bench with just 1 arm will help that person, whereas people using a chair may actually wish to transfer to the bench. And interestingly enough, having a bench with just 1 arm and no arm on the other side is actually a design which lets someone transfer from a chair to a bench, which I really thought was a very interesting idea. And we designed this accessible overlook deck. This would be on the south side of Memorial Park, being able to come in at grade and enter right onto it from those 3 perpendicular face-in parking spaces from that drive on the south side of Memorial. And this is design we did for this, allowing space for chairs, the proper kind of fencing. We took some time with our engineer to make sure we're getting the details right in terms of railing height, but also wanted a railing style that was relatively see-through to be able to see out of it. And we think this is a really neat idea. And perhaps it's even something that a business could sponsor and have their name tastefully added to, because I think this would be really wonderful if the town is interested in having that kind of relationship and funding opportunity. Plant selection, all of the plans, or at least for Memorial and Eagle, show different kinds of plants. And so we talk a little bit about what it means to have right plant, right place in terms of natives that are wildlife friendly, that are appropriate to the site, ideally purchased or accessed or donated from a local vendor, and 4-season interest. And happy to talk about this for another hour, but we'll move on from there. And then implementation, as I mentioned, okay, what's next? We have these plans, we have these design details, we have energy behind making this happen. and interest, what next? And so finding the champion, whether it's someone on the select board or the Conservation Commission, and obviously Porter's put a lot of energy and effort into it already. So I'm sure Bristol Trails Network would be involved with that. The Recreation Department has been involved and excited about the project. Maybe someone else that we spoke with during the course of the project will hear more about it and wish to take on some of the spearheading of it. And I know, Frida talked about the Land and Water Conservation Fund going for the skate park. That is a transformational kind of funding opportunity with a significant commitment from the town. But there are a lot of great opportunities to support this kind of work, and particularly organizations that are focused on accessibility, including private organizations like AARP. So the fundraising and the grant writing, certainly permitting, construction, maintenance, and potential phasing. Again, we don't need to do everything all the time right now. And so with that in mind, I have cost estimates here in the report for what we thought were reasonable ways of grouping the improvements. And in this case, at Eagle Park, 4 separate phases. Entrance signs, yes. Parking area renovations, the gravel path, so that, first outer ring of pathways, the reinforced gravel, information kiosks, internal directional signs that are anchored. And so with each of these, we have an associated conceptual cost in 2024 dollars based on VTrans studies, based on our own engineering team's ideas in our database. And VTrans also has a 5-year average price list updated for 2025 based on different types of path surfaces. Very useful for path as well as sidewalk projects, curbed, uncurbed. The second would be things like the bicycle racks, new plants, benches. The third would be that internal stabilized turf. And again, this is just our idea of grouping. If there's initiative and excitement about moving the turf into that first phase, of course, it was just a way for us to frame the cost estimates and think logically. And then there was an idea for a mechanical lift system into the water, and that would be wonderful. And so whether that's phase 4 or something that might fall into it, wouldn't it be nice someday with a dedicated funder? We included that in the cost estimate. An accessible dock for a kayak launch. And both of these would be taking that accessibility to the next level. But that, phase 4, that's $50,000 into that $272,500 for all the park improvements that we considered for Eagle Park. Similar idea, 3 phases for Memorial Park. Primarily, we were looking at the north side first, redoing that Route 17 parking area. Park entrance 500 feet signs we put for all 3 because we think that'd be really useful coming from both directions. An asphalt gathering space on the north side to at least experience somewhat then here the falls. Informational kiosk, internal directional sign. Again, we're still on the north side with the bicycle rack, accessible picnic tables, benches, planting. And then we're looking at the south side here in the pink potential phase 3. 10 parking spaces, the 3 facing in perpendicular, 7 parallel along the south side access drive, that accessible overlook, gravel paths to the accessible overlook deck, and then that other gravel path that went a little further along toward the bridge, benches on that south side, and then more internal directional signs. For a total, including all of that, all 3 of those phases, if you will, of 306,850. Sycamore Park, park entrance, 500-foot signs, parking area renovations. Of course, you'd be working with the state on that because it is their land. A stabilized turf gathering area right next to the parking that we showed you, and restoring some turf grass, taking away some of the large expanse of gravel that's currently dirt and gravel that's currently there at Sycamore Park, and the gravel path, that first loop of gravel at the park, information kiosk, internal directional signs. And then we look at some of the amenities that are still a little closer into the parking, bicycle rack, benches. We group all the benches for the whole site. Barbecue grills, flood-proofed and anchored because they seem to be popular. And then further down the phase 3, we are starting to look at the stabilized turf path, that second layer of accessibility, improving the dirt path to the river, sometime perhaps hiring a professional, at least for initial guidance, for grading 500 linear feet of that dirt, and then some more internal directional signage on the second and third levels, flood-proofed and anchored. For Sycamore Park, this estimate is $422,500. A permit overview, the report goes through the different types of permits that can be involved in this type of project. In particular, working within the right-of-way of Route 17. Certainly, it's a state highway access permit. Some things might not be required, however, based on the amount of area that would be disturbed, or particularly, in terms of thresholds, how much earthworks won't be removed or disturbance in the waterway, which we're of course trying to minimize or not have at all. But Sycamore Park, there are wetlands or wetland buffers in the area, so individual wetland permit. You can go through this individually. What we're really trying to do is to provide the roadmap, so hopefully there aren't any huge surprises moving forward. I still encourage you to work with your Kyle Medash and others, in the district and at the state who know a lot about the particulars and move forward. I also say the Addison County Regional Planning Commission is a great resource. And I'm sure, Frida, you work with them a lot, perhaps in terms of funding and sources and aggregating projects across multiple municipalities to take care of cost efficiencies and align work, especially if there's being work done on 17. What a great time to also do the work on the parking area there at Memorial Park. And we do have many grant resources here. The report itself has a lot of these hyperlinks, so we can click right on, the ACCD municipal planning grants right there in the report, and it'll take you to the information, applying for the grant, when the application cycle is. And so hopefully we've made that as user-friendly as possible for you. And the appendix, there's one appendix, basically in addition to the full set of plans. We've included that great article, which it was a pleasure to speak with the reporter, Marin Howell of the Addy Indy, back in August of last year. And then I'll just step through, here's the plan set, all the plan notes, the grading, existing conditions for all the parks, more labels and design details, plant schedules for all the planting and the replanting that we're recommending, that, those plants that we saw the pictures of in the report. Same with Memorial, everything dimensioned and to scale, again, the existing conditions and the final plan line work. Sycamore Park, existing conditions. This line here, that's the edge of the wetland. That's the edge of the map wetland. And the design recommendations. And here are the various details for the accessible parking spaces, the stabilized turf, stabilized aggregate, and plan and section view, and how all the courses would work in setting those up, as well as, plans for the overlook deck, and, planting details and such. So that's the project in about an hour. I'm grateful for the time going through it all. Any last questions? And gosh, give me a call, pick up the phone if you ever want to talk about it more. But I'm happy to.
Well, that was fantastic, Dan. Thank you so much. Thank you to you, as well as your team, as well as everyone who submitted ideas and work for this. This is an incredible resource for us.
Yeah, I just have a question on Memorial Park, if you could
Yep.
go back to that. There wasn't much consideration to, let's say we just wanted to put it back the way it is right now, replace the bridge with a newer bridge and the footpath to the bridge. There was no mention that in your cost. I was just wondering why.
Yeah, I guess we decided early on that we weren't going to address that, but I can forward to the select board tomorrow the report that was done that did consider all that, with new stone, new railings, and replaced bridge by a company named Timber and Stone. just a few years ago. Is an excellent document. They really did great work. But if I recall, it was somewhere between 500,000 and $1 million to do that right. And so early on in this project, we decided to explore different options and not go there. But, you know, the town can choose, should it, you know, wish to moving forward to do just that. And that would be beautiful and fantastic. I think we just decided in terms of sort of the umbrella of accessibility, what's possible, I guess, in the near or midterm.
When you mentioned early on about the aggregate and this mat they put down, and I showed Ian the pictures I have on my phone from July of 2019. My wife and I were at Acadia National Park and way up in the northeast of Maine, up on top of no man's land, and it was beautiful. And a lot of that, what you talked about, that aggregate, how they went up the steps and things.
Oh, that's great to hear.
I took a lot of pictures.
Excellent. Oh, that's great. I'm glad that's doing well. I'm working on a project or just completing a project up in Jeffersonville, and it's right along the Lamoille River and the Brewster River, and there's similar considerations in the floodplain. And up there, they even discussed, can you put down old tires and fill them? Again, maybe on a test basis at first, but that's something, that was an idea that one member of you know, the committee came up with up there. There's certainly plenty of tires around to try something like that with. But that's great to hear at Acadia. Yeah, but at least with these grids that you can purchase, it's a fairly well-tested technology for this kind of thing.
Okay,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you.
Any comments from the public, either here in the room or on Zoom? Feel free to use the raise your hand.
I think since this was Porter's idea, she should pay for it.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Dan. This is amazing work. Lots for us to think about going forward.
Thank you all very much. I appreciate it very much. So I'll follow up with that timber and stone report, circulate that, and make sure you all do have the link to these final project documents. Thanks again for your time.
Yeah, thank you. Great.
Okay. Is AZ on?
Yes.
All right. Moving on. EV interim bylaw update, AZ, planning and zoning.
You should be able to now. I just made you a co-host.
Lovely. Hello.
There you go.
There you go.
Perfect.
Good evening.
Yeah.
Good evening. You should be able to share a screen as well.
Perfect. For the interim bylaw, I don't have a screen to share. This is mostly an update to give a brief description of what I've been working on. So I guess this serves as my roundtable as well. In November, Bristol was awarded a grant to put a direct current fast charging EV station within the vicinity of downtown. When Ian sent me that email, I was like, yay, electric vehicles in Bristol. But looking at it from a zoning perspective, there is a roadblock there where the Bristol zoning currently does not give a clear regulatory framework for how a level 3 charging system, similar to like a Tesla charging bank that you would see at a grocery store, would be able to be placed in Bristol under the current regulations. So in order to find a solution so that Bristol can take advantage of the grant that we've been awarded, I've been working on a proposal for an interim bylaw, and I've been working with the Planning Commission in the past couple months to really tailor this in a way that it'll be ready for the select board to take from there. And tonight I wanted to give an update on what I've been doing to give an update on what an interim bylaw is and why I've been working on this. And so first, an interim bylaw is a temporary zoning bylaw that is passed by the municipal body. It provides a way for municipalities to add zoning regulations that might be missing elements. For example, the zoning not having EVs, we would be missing a grant opportunity, and an interim bylaw allows municipality to put in place a bylaw for a year-long term that then gets voted upon again if it wants to stay. And for EVs, I've been working with the planning commission to put together a proposal for the select board so that the select board knows that the planning commission has been part of this conversation. And my intentions with this proposal are to align with the town plan to allow Bristol to capture this opportunity of economic incentives of having a direct charging station downtown where people can walk to our businesses, they can enjoy our restaurants while charging. We would be connecting to the state network, and it would be a really cool opportunity for Bristol, but it would be a shame if this opportunity had to be passed because of zoning regulations, hence why I've been putting together this project. For this update, I wanted to come before the select board as I'm finalizing some work with the planning commission, and at their next meeting, they're going to be having an action on my proposal. I'm hoping that after that action meeting, I'll be able to come back to the select board with a final put together proposal for the select board to hear and decide what to do with that information, as it is the select board's decision at the end of the day, and something that I'm working on to give to the select board.
I reached out. So the project at the moment, it's still happening. I've been reading articles about some of the funding for other electric vehicle infrastructure projects being canceled or clawed back. There was the NEVI program, which is the National Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Program, and that was in Vermont in various stages. And some of those projects probably aren't going to happen now because of the way the funding has changed at the federal level. I reached out to Zach Casey at Green Mountain Power and asked him about this particular project, which is a different pot of money. And he says that that money is still available and it's still being planned to use for these projects. So we're lucky in that respect that the project will be able to go forward. So working on, obviously, the interim bylaw is an important part of that, to be able to get that and use that project here.
So Easy, you're saying that we have no zoning, so if a private developer on private property wanted to come in, I'm gonna not pick on Walgreens or Shaw's, but Pomelo Real Estate wanted to put some units over there, we don't have zoning they couldn't do that at this time, correct?
This is where I'm saying that the zoning is inconsistent and a little murky, which is not necessarily what you want for zoning. An EV could be considered an accessory use to the commercial building. But then you get into the fact that maybe is that charging station really an accessory use to Walgreens, or is it a use of that parking lot?
What if it was mounted on the side of the building at Shaw's or any business here in town? Does the zoning cover that, or do we have zoning if the board voted to want to put one on the park that I'm not in favor of? But I'll say that right up front. But if we wanted one there, or Mount Abraham Union High School wanted 3 in their parking lots, in each parking lot along the edges for their students coming in and staff, could they do that with our present zoning?
No. Really, the only zoning I see is the only path for electric vehicles in our zoning is as an accessory use to a principal structure. So, for example, a single family home.
Okay.
The single family home doesn't need a permit to put a plug-in in. They need a permit to charge their own vehicle?
No, no, no,
That's
no.
all, I didn't think so.
That was just an example, but also
Right.
looking at the impact of these direct current fast charging systems, they involve having a transformer. They involve a lot more utilities and infrastructure than a at-home generation system would for an EV. So looking at the impact as well of these fast charging systems, they do have a bigger impact on our communities, and the zoning regulations are there to lead development in a way that takes into account the impact on our community. So if we, without clear and without clear zoning, there is no regulatory framework for how these large charging stations impact our community and how we can control that.
Well, thanks for that. That's great. Good update to hear.
All right, any further questions on that? GIS system proposal. I guess you're gonna
Yay.
have to explain what that is because I'm lost.
I'm so glad you asked what GIS is. I can't wait to explain it to you. GIS is actually one of my hobbies and meant from when I was studying. And I put together a presentation for this. So tonight I want to talk to you about Bristol tax maps and GIS, which is Global Information Systems. But first I want to take a zoom out from Bristol and look at a state level and talk about the Vermont Parcel Program and Parcel Viewer. I'm sure everyone knows this picture, state of Vermont with all the towns and municipalities, GORs, and cities. And back in 2017, 2019, the state led a program called the Vermont Parcel Program that digitized all the parcel data within municipalities and put it onto a online viewable website. It is now a state-maintained mapping service. It provides data on land ownership, property records, acreage, if there was property transfers, and the data they get comes from the town tax map data. So this is a statewide program that relies on municipalities to provide up-to-date data to create this database. Bristol actually was part of this program back in 2018, and that is the last time our data was updated to the state of Vermont. As you can see, Bristol here is a dark brown, and that indicates that our data has not been updated since, has been out of date for 6+ years. Colchester up here with the dark blue updates their global information systems data every 6 months to this state service. What is GIS? Peeker, this is for you. GIS is Global Information Systems. It's a computer software that stores, analyzes, and displays geospatial data. What does that really mean? It's connecting geological data points to, for example, we could look at census data. By looking at zip codes, you can tie that to an actual geolocation spot and use that to analyze larger issues, mostly planning issues. You can look at environmental. The Agency of Natural Resources uses GIS to monitor wetlands, impacted streams. It can be used to communicate data. You can use it for doing long-term planning. It's a great way to provide the public with data, and it can really enhance efficiency in data storing and sharing. So it's a really cool tool that can be used in a vast variety of ways, and for municipalities, for businesses, for environmental conservation groups. It's a tool that has so many different possibilities. But mainly for but who's using GIS? It's the state, it's the regional planning, It's construction companies, it's land trusts, it's Bristol is using GIS. When we work with the Regional Planning Commission, they're maintaining our zoning data in GIS. So in a online in store data, they have our zoning files there. And then the state is also using GIS to put together the interactive map viewer here. I use this every day in my office when I help people with zoning. It's how I can get a grasp of where people are. It's where I can show people, it's where I can see contour, I can see rivers. It's something I use every day. So who is using GIS? So many people. And a variety of different state agencies, federal, other towns, the regional planning. It's a useful tool that is used by so many. And looking a little bit long term, when it comes to GIS, especially for me, the planning department, looking long term is important. For being compatible with the state and regional data, as I mentioned at the beginning, our GIS data has not been updated since 2018. And this is because LaRose Surveys, who maintains our tax maps currently, uses CAD data, which is not compatible with GIS, as CAD data does not have a geolocation. So you cannot do the same analysis based in GIS as you can. You can't do spatial analysis with CAD data, as there is no spatial location. So compatibility with the state and regional is going to be super beneficial long term, as there is a Act 250 reform bill, Act 181, that is going to be bringing future land use mappings to the regional planning commissions. They're going to be talking to you more about that. I would love to talk to you about that, but I'm going to focus on GIS for Bristol. Public data and information is getting increasingly more accessible, especially with the state parcel viewer. Residents are able to pull up their property. They're able to see more information. It's more accessible online. And providing that to the public builds a sense of trust as well. Some benefits for the town offices. There's a great compatibility with NEMRIC with a lot of GIS services, and GIS does open a lot of doors for planning projects, just with the tools of analysis, but that is looking long term. I want to bring it back to Bristol now and talk about our current tax maps. Currently, we have LaRose Surveys, who's been doing our tax maps for long before I started, for a very long time, and very generous of them to do this. They've been doing it as a kind of courtesy to the town. I've spoke with Ron about my idea of moving to a GIS mapping vendor, as I didn't want to step on his toes with this idea, as they're the ones currently doing our mapping. As you can see, this image on the right is what our current tax map looks like. This is CAD data. So you have all the lines there. It stores all the data, but this data kind of stays here. There's not much more you can do with it. And to show this comparison, I have the GIS data from the Vermont State Parcel Viewer compared to the CAD data. The GIS data allows for much more, you can show much more. As you can see the streams that are coming off the cliffs here, coming down, the New Haven, where that river is. You can show different characteristics of the surrounding land. You can turn off data layers, you can turn them on. It's much more versatile. So where's the problem with our current tax mapping system? It's outdated, not LaRose surveys, but the CAD data files. They're not compatible with the state, therefore, at a state level, we are out of compliance with their data submission for the parcel viewer. This is not a requirement by the state to to switch to a GIS mapping vendor, but it is a recommendation. And I've spoken with the listers who have had conversations with state GIS technicians suggesting that we move to a GIS vendor for ease of compatibility. And then also ease of use. I've spoken with the listers and the mapping practices currently, there's a backlog of making the changes to the tax maps. So moving to a GIS vendor would open up ease of use for the listers and other town staff, as well as I mentioned before, compatibility with regional and state agencies. A look at who are mapping vendors in the state and what other towns are using. Here we have a map from the Vermont Parcel Viewer, Vermont Parcel Programs, kind of tracking of who is contracted where. As you can see, CIA Technologies is a huge vendor for Vermont, covering most of the state. Chris Chamberlain, who is based out of Bristol, is mainly focused in Addison County. And then we have NEMREC, Regional Planning and Town Managed GIS. And then lastly, Cartographic Technologies Incorporated in orange here. And I wanted to bring up these vendors because I reached out to a couple, to 3 of these vendors just to see some estimates, gain some ideas on what it would look like if Bristol moved to GIS mapping. I reached out to CIA Technologies, Cartographic Technologies Inc., and Chris Chamberlain. Chris Chamberlain was very nice and said, "Thank you for thinking of me," but she is quite busy with her current workload. So I moved forward having discussions with CIA and CTI. A look at CIA Technologies and what they offer. They offer a web map service where our tax maps would be kept in an online program as well as printed in PDF copies, which is important for the clerk and the listers having the paper copies. But this would be a web viewer that would be available online where tax map records would be kept and tied to and can be tied to property cards. And CIA would be the ones maintaining this map service, providing updates. They would keep updates maintained throughout the year. And that is similar to CTI. Both mapping vendors are doing similar things where they're managing the tax map records and managing some GIS services as well. Cartographic Technologies Inc., same offerings. I've talked with both. CTI is a Vermont-based company who has a range of opportunities that they offer. They would either just do tax map upkeep, they offer this online web viewer, or a desktop version as well. So they have some differences in what they offer there. But in both my conversations with these companies, when I kind of looked into what it would require for Bristol to switch from CAD data, from this data here on the right, to GIS data, both companies talked about the conversion costs of taking the existing data that we have and taking it from that CAD data to GIS data. A lot of that work would involve correcting some errors in the GIS data that is currently there and updating it to the most recent tax maps that have been done. Just doing a little bit of formatting. Some of the biggest ones you can see here in this GIS data here, the river parcel data around that is not really following where the river is. So minor things like that would be corrected and fixed. So looking at costs of what are we paying currently for our mapping, I did some research into what we've paid LaRose in the past years. This is looking at every payment we've made to LaRose from 2012 to 2024. with an average payment being a little over $1,000 a year for tax map maintenance. Looking at some cost estimates I received from the two companies I reached out to, the upfront conversion cost would be the most expensive part of switching vendors, as the cost to combine the CAD data and the regional planning commission zoning data together, as well as updating the maps, is the biggest upfront cost. From there, CIA has a flat fee of $3,000 a year, with CTI having a their contract is based off time billed, as well as they have the options for the either web viewer or the desktop software, which is an additional charge of $450 and $350 respectively. So with switching to a mapping vendor, it's definitely a bigger upfront cost. But I believe long term it will pay off for itself tenfold. And in my conversations with both these companies, they have mentioned that they offer 2-year or 3-year payment programs to ease that kind of upfront costs on municipalities, because they understand that small towns don't necessarily have a lot of extra cash lying around. So they do offer opportunities to break that cost up to make it more feasible. Looking at where Bristol can fund switching vendors, the Lister department has budget lines for map maintenance. This is where the annual tax map updates comes from already. And then they have a budget line for professional services. Right now that is sitting at around $12,500. This line item turns back to $2,000 for the next fiscal year. So by January 30th, this line item kind of disappears.
June 3rd.
June 30th.
June 30th, my bad. Sorry, day months. My bad. But so this line item is here but for a short time. So in summary, Peter, I hope I answered what GIS was more.
Yeah, I'm just curious because there's a hunting app that I'm sure is that is the same thing, because it is really accurate.
Yeah. So that hunting app.
And so I'm just curious as to where they get their information, because it tells you where you are and it tells you whose property you're on.
Yeah. So they're probably using a mix of different data sources. This is where it gets really cool with GIS, because the federal government, the US Geological Survey, maintains a lot of maps on land use, different data types for tree cover. So there's so many different governmental agencies that are maintaining data records. And then you also have companies like Google who are providing you with your GPS on how to get around. So GIS systems are using satellites, geolocations to collect all this data. And then your hunting app is probably pulling from the parcel viewer in Vermont of property records.
So one additional thing for this, I had a meeting with Jill and other folks about tree plantings. And I was talking to Jill about this, that AZ was going to present this. And Jill was excited with the idea of, with the GIS, you could have all of our water lines on there. You could create an overlay view of just that, or you could create one for all the tree plantings or for sewer and things like that. So by, we obviously you're paying money to have someone put that in. We're looking at, contracting with someone potentially who could come in and do the data, and it's so like a yearly update or a quarterly update or 6 months. So this would be part of that. But most of the time, especially with our new water system, you put it in once and it's there, and you can access it whenever you want. And there's a few changes here and there as we have new connections, going on through the year, but it can just sit there.
Well, we talked about getting location of all our curb boxes, so she didn't have to go and search for them. If that was on there with
I thought we did that once with Alan.
But
build
Yeah.
for it, yeah.
But I mean, we
Maybe
probably
don't.
have it, but it's not in a format that's can be easily accessible.
So I will say that yes, these are all things that GIS can do. But the main focus of this is on tax
Yeah.
map GIS
Yeah.
vendors who would be
Yeah.
maintaining the tax maps. Although I would love to ask the select board another time to think about getting a GIS license for the town, but that's a couple years down the line, I think.
So AZ, if I understand this right, they have to convert the current tax maps? If they don't do that, what's the other option?
The other option is we can continue working with LaRose and maintaining our tax maps. It's, like I said, not a requirement by the state right now that our data be updated, but it's certainly moving that way. That having that up-to-date data is important. And I've spoken with Ron and Kevin, and they're not really moving towards GIS in their capacity. So
No, I guess my thought was if they don't, in order for this to work, they have to convert the CAD data, or can they go out and get all new data?
So what they could do is they could take the data that was from the 2018 digitizing of the parcel data, and then use the data from the Regional Planning Commission, our zoning data, and use that to kind of update. But conversion is kind of the necessary step to make everything up to date. We could keep on going with LaRose, updating the tax maps, and then just having the data be managed by the company, but it wouldn't really align.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was just curious if there was another way other than just converting the CAD
You
data.
could go out and get all new data, but it makes more sense to convert the CAD data rather than go out and basically resurvey the whole town.
Yep, okay.
Jessica, you got some?
Yeah, I just had a question. Could you go back a couple of slides to the one that pulled the property tax card, and then also, yeah, this one. I really like this system because then as the planning commission updates zoning districts, you can do map overlays that way. Plus you can see the property card.
Yeah.
This one looks, did you talk to people who were using this software? Is it better than the other one?
So both of these softwares you can't see, but I should have turned on when I took the screenshot of this, but this little layers button over here, if you click on that, it does offer similar showings to this here, or to the right side here, where you can pull up either the zoning districts, other options here. The map viewer is kind of a build your own sandbox of what do you want to be shown to people? Do you want your zoning boundaries? Do you want to have wetlands on there if you want to like show where properties might be
Okay.
at risk?
So is there a difference between the functionality of the two, or is the only difference the price? Because obviously one has a better price than the others.
Yeah. So the functionality, I did a very preliminary look into this because I didn't want to request formal like proposals from these companies, as it's the select board's decision. But from my understanding, CIA is they're a larger company and their offerings are, I actually got to meet with Cartographic Technologies, one of the owners, Susan, and it seems to me that CTI actually, their functionality has much more versatility with what they offer here. This is the web viewer, but they also offer a desktop viewer that can be used by the town. So in my preliminary research, I would say that CTI not only has the better price, but I think has more resources that could be utilized by the town. But I think the functionality would be pretty hand in hand at the end of the day if we're looking at what they're offering of maintaining our tax map data and providing a place to show that data to the public. Equal, but I think CTI has more offerings.
Thank you.
I can tell you that for in my office and doing title searches, these things are really handy to find out who owns what around when you're doing a search. You know who the land records are, you know, or know the landowners. The property card is really nice because sometimes we don't always have access to that. But if it's not up to date, then it's a problem because sometimes they aren't always 100% up to date, but they're a huge advantage.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a big reason why I've looked into finding a GIS vendor is because I've heard it from the listers. I heard it from the GIS technician for the E911 board. I went to a training and he pulled up Bristol's parcels on the state website and just showed a bunch of places where the data was so out of date that it's no longer really reliable or usable. And I think as a town, we want our data that people can find to be accessible, but also to be up to date and current and provide people the information they're really looking for.
I'm assuming you can't find the tax maps online, and this you would be able to.
You can find our tax maps, I actually don't think are published as PDF online.
Not all are online,
No.
and most aren't kept up to date if they are online.
Yeah. The tax map in the vault at the town hall is the kind of go-to place for the current Bristol tax map, the PDF or the paper copy.
And if we switch systems, it would be available under this format.
It could be if we wanted it with CIA, it would be they offer a web viewer immediately. With CTI, they this is an extra offering if we just want someone to update the data and keep the paper tax map copies up to date with the state. They would do that as well.
Have you looked into, you mentioned regional planning uses this system. Would they maintain our system like CIA or CT? Have you asked that question?
I did not reach out to them. Most regional planning commissions aren't really wanting to be the mapping vendors for towns. It's more of like, if you look at this map here, regional planning is doing 6 municipalities in all of Vermont. Regional commissions are required to, or they help with zoning data to make sure that is meeting state standards. I have not reached out to the Regional Planning Commission. I'd be willing to do that if that's something the select board would like to hear. But I mainly focused on talking with GIS vendors who are solely GIS vendors.
I mean, excuse me, correction of tax maps or creating of a tax map. When I was in the lister's office, it starts in your office with, somebody comes in, I got a 3-acre lot and then I'm in 5 acre, I got 5 acres of land and I'm in a 2-acre zone. I'd like to split it up between a 3 and a 2. And here are the measurements. And then it used to come from zoning to our office, to the lister's office. And then we would, if that had a parcel number, we'd create another parcel number for the split off 2 acres. And then we put it in the tax map file. And at that time it was Ken would come in and adjust the tax maps every once in a while. He'd come in and get a handful of them and do them once a month or so, and kind of like LaRose does, I think. So, I mean, you're talking to somebody right now that fell into this thing last July and December. Thought he bought 1.8 acres and only bought 1.4. And for 81 years, this town never corrected the tax map. and the Lucy's, who I bought the property from, the trust, paid taxes on 0.4 acres of land they never owned for 81 years.
It's not uncommon.
I'll say
Yeah,
that again, for 81, and for
Wow.
41 years, the correct map was in there in the office, and it never got to the tax mapper.
so
We paid taxes on 20 acres of land that we didn't have for 40 some odd years, so.
And Myra did that on 20+ acres, she thought she had for same kind of thing, and she asked what their recourse was, and I'm like, there is none.
Yeah, so I mean, my theory there is garbage in, garbage out on a computer. If you don't put in the correct information, you.
yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so with a GIS vendor, the ease of getting those changes on the map would be so much more efficient. When I talked to CTI, Susan, that's her name, basically said you can send a picture of a survey plat as, and then she would be able to work with that to update the maps. And of course, that that makes it easier for, if I get a subdivision, I can just send that to her, and then once the listers get the parcel ID created, they can just email the mapping vendor, and the data is constantly being up to date without much of a lag. So hopefully no one else would have to pay taxes on a property for 81 years. That's the hope.
Yeah.
Would there be any advantage to using Nemrick? Is there anything tied to the tax maps as far as tax bills or any of that? Well, I'm just, we've just updated all our Nemrick
Yeah.
stuff, and Nemrick has probably the second largest share of communities on that map. I'm just asking the question. I'm not.
Yeah.
Camera stuff, so they have all the parcel ID information that you're tying to the tax map.
Yeah.
That's the piece they have, but I don't know that they do the other side.
Yeah,
It's a certain percentage of what we might use, I think, Nemrick offers. But I think we want to be able to open it up and be able to have a system that allows us the flexibility for future use.
And personally, I would go with a GIS company that
Okay, well,
specializes.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah, I
agree,
know what you're saying.
but also one that works with, AZ don't both CAI and CTI both have a Nemrick tie-in?
Yeah,
Yeah.
they both have Nemrick tie-ins. That's how you're able to see the property card here.
But I thought,
Okay.
Have you called? I mean, it's early, I realized. Had you called any of the towns that said, in one with the green there, the top one, you said that you may get, well, they've gotten so big, we don't get much service from it, but it's too expensive to change. Would you, I'd like to see a phone call or two to some towns. And, to say.
well,
Fully commit.
I mean, I personally worked with Moncton and they use CAI.
CAI, okay.
And that was exactly what the problem was, is as CAI grew, it was a challenge to get their.
Kind of like our auditors?
For them to focus on the smaller towns. I mean,
Yeah.
they do beautiful work. Don't get me, it was great work and they did a beautiful transition into their product. But it just felt like they got too big. It's sort of like what we've seen.
And it doesn't mean that we couldn't switch vendors if we reached a point where we felt the service wasn't compatible. We can still have that offering. I think the idea here is sort of, what this presentation is sort of culminating in is sort of the permission from the board for AZ to continue research on this and to get some fully fleshed out quotes from companies, maybe to reach out to regional planning, see what they say, and also reach out to other towns to see how they feel their services.
They're happy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. The main reason I wanted to bring up this presentation was just to see if there was any interest from the select board to continue pursuing this. I did receive, when I was talking with CTI, I was very clear. I said I need to bring this before the select board before we go further. She did provide me a very in-depth proposal though. And I've shared that with Ian so that the board has access to that as well. The it's a very well done proposal. I was only looking for an estimate, and I was given a very full proposal. So that I've received from CTI, and I want to be upfront about that. I was not asking for a request for proposal. I was asking for an estimate, and I was given a full proposal, which is very, very interesting. I read through it. With the select board's permission, I would like to continue getting full proposals from CIA to do more calls with other towns, kind of as Ian was saying, and to further flush this out so that the board can make their own decision.
Well, and I'd like to also, what Ian mentioned about the water, locating all our lines, if we wanted to locate our trees, or at least locate our hydrants on that, what that cost would be. Okay, we're going, they put out a cost and then,
Yeah.
okay, is that board on the water use because it's water related and things of that nature.
Yeah.
I think-
So I will say, when I was talking with Susan from CTI, I mentioned that I do GIS. I'm actually going back to school at UVM doing a professional education, getting a certificate in GIS technologies. So I do have GIS experience, and I mentioned that with Susan, and she mentioned that as a little offering to Bristol, she would give me kind of a back door into the GIS program, and I would be able to do the tree inventory and water lines using a little bit of CTI's technology.
Okay. How does this talking about that, you talked about your experience with GIS and obviously learning that, but we need to get a license for that. If we, let's say we started at this level and we get to a point where a license makes sense and you're interested in doing that, does that dovetail in with that? Is it something where you have to go with something completely separate?
I will say although truly I would love for Bristol get a GIS license, I do not think it would be a feasible idea for at least another 5-10 years.
Okay.
Honestly, 10-15, because the cost of a ArcGIS Esri license is so high, especially for a small municipality where we have the Regional Planning Commission, and if we go with the GIS mapping vendor, those two groups would cover the mapping needs of Bristol.
Okay.
Yeah, adding on the license would be premature.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good. So what are the board's thoughts in terms of AZ continuing research on this and bringing a bigger proposal?
I would say flush it out and come up with a recommendation.
Okay.
I don't.
Michelle, Jessica, am I okay with you in terms of just
Yeah, that's fine with me.
consent from the board?
Definitely.
So I've got some, unanswered, but at least flush it out and do some due diligence.
Do you have more questions for tonight, or do you want to do it on a?
No, not so much. I'd like to see, like, Chris said that Moncton uses it, but I'd like to vent those towns.
Okay.
Say, okay, we're down to 2 finalists.
Yeah.
And then we're gonna now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what we're asking AZ to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Does that sound good, AZ?
That sounds perfect. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you. That was terrific.
Anything else for AZ before we let her go?
No. AZ is done for the evening. Thank you.
Onward, select board calendar, goals for the upcoming year.
All right, I spent a little time on this. This was from last time we met. So I filled in a few of these, not a tremendous amount of difference. But we're in, where are we now? We're in March. So we're looking at this. We're getting into our third quarter review, January from March. We're looking at this is in April, water line replacement project updates. We're meeting tomorrow, talk about water lines. We also want to begin our water and sewer department capital plan discussion. We've got the police district townwide expansion discussions. I think that should be pretty close on our list if we're looking at doing something for next March. And then just want to check back in with ARPA and see where we are with some of those funding allocations, or at least the projects that were related to that. In May, we've got our water and sewer department public hearings, and we've got setting our budgets, so that's our beginning of that in April. We also have, it's not on here, but I'll add it in. In April, we'll have our final proposal for the police department negotiations in terms of the union contract. So we're done with that. And Chris Hoare is working on the final sort of updates. And so we'll bring that to the board for sign off. We had 7 good meetings with that group. We're looking at our local emergency management plan. We got a few updates we need to do on that. And our company that we've contracted with is working on that at the moment. I'd like to bring back the revolving loan fund application materials. We've done a lot of work on that, but it's never been sort of finalized.
Can we have, okay, we're gonna update the RFL.
Yeah, we've been working on that.
How about a list of what's out there already?
Sure.
What's not been paid?
I've been working on it for 2 weeks, and the data.
Gonna need 2 more weeks at least?
Yeah. Getting, if you want accurate numbers.
Yeah.
It'll give me a couple more weeks and I'll have it done.
Okay,
Yeah, it's just one of those things that.
and I see you got the library steps there, porch replacement.
Yes, so I have a RFP ready to go for that, to put that out there. Again, the same kind of construction that we did for Holly Hall front steps, looking for a contractor for that. So hopefully we'll get some interest in that, and we can pick a contractor for that particular one. Let's see. Obviously in June, we've got our compensation adjustments, and with any luck, we'll have our presentation for the 23 and 24 audits from our auditors. Going in July, we're looking at our 4th quarter budget review. August, we've got our tax rate. So this is where it starts to get a little bit thin as we just figure out what's going on for the rest of the year. And so we've got, and I've sort of done it into the next year. We can start filling that out. And so we've got, oh, Jessica, yeah.
Sorry, it took me a minute to unmute. I just wanted to say, first of all, that this is super helpful. Thank you so much for putting this together. And then if you could just go back 1 page to where you had the, sure. Or maybe it's 2 pages. Yeah, sorry, 1 more. There you go. I am talking to a student RA who has pretty good data analysis skills. And I was going to see if he could do research for us on what the range of local option taxes look like in different towns in Vermont. And to try to collect that data for us and sort of do some data simulations about like, what would that look like? I don't know if I'll be able to get college funding for him since we're already so deep into the semester. So do you think that if this could be like in the October meetings, that would still be useful, or does it really need to be before then to talk about a local option tax?
I don't think so. I think October is okay.
I think so.
I mean, we still have quite a ways until March in terms of us presenting this.
You have to have the warning done by the end of January, so work your way back.
Okay.
Well, you're saying it was in October, you're gonna be a new fiscal year, is that what you're thinking? Am I reading that right, Jessica? So you can get some funding for them then, but not now?
Usually they like you to ask for funding at the beginning of the semester. Then they spend it all. So if I can apply in like August, I'll get funding. He can work starting in September. So by like October, he should have information for us to look over. So that was my thinking. But if that's too late, then I can definitely ask now. I just don't know if they still have money in that fund.
I mean, I would ask now if you can and see what happens.
Okay.
But I do think October, having actual final sort of information about it does give us enough time.
Right. So
okay.
I had a harebrained thought on that one.
Uh-oh.
Why is everybody going? So this whole local option tax has gotten to the point where more and more towns are doing it.
Yep.
The money is collected by the state and divvied out
Yes.
75-25, I think.
I thought it was 60,
So-
40. We get 60, they get
They're
40.
shooting-
So
change
if that's the case, and all these towns are doing it, would we be wiser to petition the legislature to do a 1% tax statewide that goes back to the towns? And then we don't have to worry about any of it. Because now I can tell you for us, it's a nightmare. If we deliver gravel to Middlebury,
You gotta,
we have to pay it.
they come and get it.
If they come and get it, we don't pay it.
And it's the same customer. That's
Yeah.
gotta be an eight.
You order
Yeah,
it,
they are nightmare.
you go to Goodrill's and get material and buy it there, you gotta pay the 1 cent Middlebury tax. You have them delivered to my house on Pine Street, I don't pay the 1 cent.
Yeah.
Cause I'm gonna,
So I don't, I'm just curious, because is it worth asking the question?
Right. I mean, I think that could be part of the
Definitely.
research. Yeah,
And it could also be like a short term, long term, like maybe short term, we levy the tax because who knows how long the state government would take to do something like that, even if we ask now. But we could always then, get rid of that tax if the state's going to take it over. I just don't know what their time frame would be, like how quickly they would have that discussion, get it on the agenda, get it through committee, have all of the open debates, and then
It won't
enact it.
happen, it won't happen this year because they've already been through crossover and,
you ain't gonna get one legislator to hook onto that.
yeah.
To 1 cent, raise up 6%.
I think it's definitely worth adding that question into the mix in terms of the research. Okay.
But we're already doing it.
Yeah, I mean, that way there, it would all be collected by the state. It would all go to one place and then they'd just send it back to the towns and everybody would be equal.
Yep.
And that makes sense, so it won't happen.
They throw common sense right out the window this first day of legislature.
So, so this is Valid created this form before, so I'm just sort of, it's not my design of this was Val's. I did take our current list and projects that she had put together year after year, and I've updated it in terms of breaking it down into the different categories, which I think is useful. The list was very long before, and it's sort of, mixed a bunch of different projects together. I've sort of broken it down now, and this is our current one in terms of financial based things, administrative and towns and buildings, facilities, things like that. So this gives us a handy sort of chart to be able to see what we're currently working on. These are our current projects, the ones that are actually in progress, which is a heck of a lot. And I've moved some of these that have sat here for a while into the next list.
That fourth one down under road sidewalks and transportation projects, I'd like to see the word Garfield changed to West Pleasant Street, but that's me.
Yeah,
I'd like to actually
this was
talk to
based
our
on
people who
last
plow
year.
our sidewalks. Where do you think the worst sidewalks are? And if we do a road trip this year, I'd like to be a walking trip also, and to walk some of them
Sure.
and show them.
I mean, we have the research that was done by the students a couple of years ago.
Because we put a fairly new one on Garfield Street, and it's, Pinker, remember, it's always was try to be the policy of the board. If one street's got double sidewalks
Right.
on both sides, have a real good one on one side at least, to some of the streets that only
Let
have
them
one.
trip and fall on the other.
Well, no, but like West Pleasant, that's a route to school, and that one
Yes.
from Maple to West Pleasant is in terrible, terrible shape. Not half, about half of it is, it's in really bad shape.
Yeah.
Front of Royce is really bad.
Yeah, the Garfield Street one was a
Royce-
previous decision. I left it in there because it was the previous decision. But I'm not exactly sure why that one was picked myself. It didn't seem very high on the list of ones to do, and there are others, but there was obviously some reason that was chosen. But it never went out because we got delayed with that.
Well,
We
that's
can
what
definitely, we can definitely revisit
select
that
board's
list, and
concerns.
we can talk about that and get more detail, and definitely walk around and sort of see, because there are a lot that, and I think the picking of ones that only have a single side of sidewalk that need repair, that obviously should be a priority
move up.
over.
Should have a
each side.
grading schedule.
Yes, exactly.
I ask a question? You have Garfield Street. You're talking about all of Garfield Street?
I do not know. You would have to go back in time and look at our past meetings for that discussion. I can't remember why we.
I think that's the
We
north
did a
side.
bunch on-
We did. We
My
did a-
thought process though was like, we were doing like sections of this road, sections of that road,
Yes.
or whatever. For me, it's just like, can we just pick a street and
Yeah.
do sidewalk and then work that in the inventory. So it's like, okay, in 10 years from now, then we have to do Garfield Street again or whatever, rather than 30
Yes.
on Garfield Street from here to here and 50 feet on Church Street from here to here.
Well,
Yeah, and we can also tie this into the water line project as well. I mean, that's gonna be starting with any luck next year. And so there is gonna be information about what streets are being done, what sidewalk is being disturbed because of that project. So that's definitely a way that we can tie all that together and get the best choices available to us. So yeah, so that's all our different projects for this year. And this is up on the website. You know, we've got, let me just look through here. So yeah, I'm working on the scope of work for the library front porch replacements. Holly Hall building renovations continue to move along. We've heard back from Silver Maple and unfortunately declined sort of the interest, but they did say when you get to a point with the actual energy systems to reach out to them. So I think the larger project in terms of the entire tear down and replacement of the interior seemed like a bit much perhaps for their schedule. But we could definitely, as we get to a point, reach out to them for other parts of the project. Same thing with the Lawrence Memorial Library. They're sort of tied together, even though they're two different grants. I'm working on bringing Asher from Vermont Integrated Architecture back for a meeting just to discuss what a proposal for them might look like in terms of designing the renovation or what would happen in the renovation. And this week we have a meeting with Tom from Renovation Works in terms of a discussion about what it would cost to sort of take away the entire wall system upstairs in order to be able to move towards replacing that. Obviously, Bristol Skate Park redesign that continues as a third and final meeting coming soon. For that, we just met today in terms of the Harvey Road Class 3 feasibility study. That was just a brief discussion in terms of the beginning of that project, and that's to sort of figure out if we can move it from a Class 4 to a Class 3 because of the new housing development that's going to happen there, as well as the new Willow Well School that's there at the end of Harvey Road. Lincoln paving, that'll happen hopefully this year with any luck. And Basin Street keeps moving along. Let's see, Briggs Hill, we're still sort of in a holding pattern with that, trying to figure out what to do.
Lincoln Road was paved last year. The base coat.
Top.
And you planning on the top
Yeah.
for this year?
Yeah, Frida says we got like 25 grand left of the grant money. And so,
Gonna be all thin paving.
and so she, you know, she doesn't like leaving money or giving it back.
Yeah,
So-
I don't blame her.
So I reached out to Mike and got a price on topping it.
How much top? Not 1 inch.
2.5 or two.
2, okay.
It's, yeah.
Cause I think that's where I think that's part of our problem is when we put a 1 inch or 1.5 inch top coat on. If there's any imperfections there at all, we end up popping, yeah.
Yeah, I will look at the estimate again to make sure.
Okay.
Pretty sure it's 2-inch top.
Yeah, okay, great. Yeah, so that'll be nice. We obviously got the water line project happening. We're in
No,
the,
I didn't think we were doing.
no, we're doing that one. We're almost at the end of
Wait a
the design.
minute, Doug. You mean, Steve and we're going out to bid for,
No,
no.
just in terms of the multiple sections.
Oh, yeah,
sections of
yeah.
that
We're
project.
going
Yeah, we
out
have
to bid for
we're in the
spring of
design.
26.
Yes, we're in the design phase.
Right, okay.
But we're moving towards hopefully securing the funding for that in terms of that project, and then it'll be put out to bid next year. We're also working on the Bristol East and South water line design phase 2. That's in the early phase. Surface inventory is almost complete. What else is here? We have a grant for the Mountain Street stormwater mitigation scoping study. We got to put that together. Frida and I are going to work on that. We've already mentioned that all hazard mitigation plan that's coming, wrapping up soon.
I see you've got grease trap maintenance monitoring.
Yeah, we got that as well. So those are projects that are currently active. These are our future ones, again, sort of broken down into the different sections. We've got some of the big ones, you know, these have been on here for quite a while. the town garage building improvements, replacement site and facility analysis, that was something that we were gonna work on this year, but I'm a little hesitant given the amount of projects that we have. And I don't know what that means sort of going forward. I don't know if that's a next year kind of project. But it's something that we need to sort of meet and talk about just to get a handle on how many things are currently in play and the money that's involved with them.
Well, I think that question could be answered whether the board thinks that we're gonna go March town meeting 26 for bond
Right.
for new town garage. I think that will answer.
Yeah.
If we say, no, we don't think we're ready yet, or yeah, we're ready, we're not ready to, but.
I think we need to look at.
Have we put it off long
financially-
enough?
I know, but financially, where
Where
we're
we
at.
are.
Yeah,
Right.
and what that means in terms of what the budget will be next year.
Yeah, because there's no grant money for that,
No,
build a new garage.
no, I mean, and there are local communities that have built new garages, so we can get a pretty good idea of what those cost. Be great to get a set of plans from them and just build it that way, but I don't know if that's
If you
gonna
go to
happen.
steel building, I mean, all those companies just engineer them for you. I mean, all the money that we spend
Yeah,
on design and engineering,
You can get it done by,
my God, it's wasteful.
I can get you some plans.
yeah, okay.
If
But yeah, so we need
Eric
to have that discussion. So that's where we're at, and then here is our completed projects that have happened over the years.
So I don't see our search for an administrator anywhere there on our calendar.
It should be, well, it should be in this one in March.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on there. That hasn't been forgotten, trust me. Yeah, and we're gonna speak about that tonight.
I figured we were,
Yeah.
but I just,
Yeah,
I don't
you're right. It
see.
should be on there. Yeah, I will add that to the list. Okay, so that's where we are with that.
All right, are we ready to move on?
I think so, yeah.
Alright. Review and approval of past meeting minutes.
I was gonna put that under one of our selectmen's goals, clean up the past minutes.
I think
I'm working on that, so I've got, yeah, so 224 and 310 from this year, and then I've got a set of 3 from 2024. July and a couple of Octobers, and then I have a bunch lined up. I'm going through a list and organizing it, and with our new sort of file organization system, it's a little bit easier to put everything in one place where everyone can access it. So I've been going through those and trying to find yes. No, it is, that's one of the little things that I'm chipping away at.
I thought we accepted all the past drafts.
No, there are some that not. I've been going through minutes to see when we've accepted, because those were not updated, unfortunately. This is one of those things that was a lower priority with the previous administrator, which is completely understandable given the amount of work that they were doing.
Okay, so what dates are we doing tonight?
We're doing,
Motion to approve them all, the ones that
There you go.
you had listed, because I went through.
okay.
Second,
Third. Is there a fourth out there?
All right,
It was 7/22, 24, 10/14, 24, 10/28, 24, 2/24, 25, and 3/10, 25. And I'll make sure that in the minutes for this meeting, those are listed. It's just, I did a catch-all kind of phrase in the agenda, just because there are a few that still need to be approved from previous years. But I'm working on it, I'm getting organized.
so I have a motion and a second. Any errors or omissions on those minutes? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
I-
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. We
Great.
just knocked off a pile.
Yeah.
Authorized warrants and liquor and tobacco licenses. Anything for liquor and tobacco?
Yes. Hogback Mountain Brewing has first class and outdoor consumption permit request, and Bristol Country Store has second class license plus their 2 tobacco ones.
Make a motion, or we don't need it. We'll do it.
Yeah, we need an
Motion.
motion so that she
To
can
file those, or do, the clerk to do whatever she needs to do.
have a second.
Second.
A motion and a second to authorize liquor and tobacco licenses. Further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
I
Opposed, nay. Motion carried. Warrant.
Warrant is $94,687.25.
Wonderful.
And it's 3 weeks to our next meeting, so.
Gonna be large next one.
All right, select board roundtable. Jessica.
I don't have anything.
What?
I already shared.
Michelle,
I'm good.
Ian,
Nothing for me, thanks.
I'm gonna skip Joel.
Well, I got a
Joel,
number of them.
go ahead, Joel.
Do we want a road trip this year?
Yes, it's on, it's on our list.
Okay. Are we gonna open up Briggs Hill
No,
for the summer?
nope.
No,
Okay, no, we just asked and I said, well, okay. I did go to the.
Well,
Thursday-
so hold on. We willing to talk about that? If we say that now publicly, that we're not gonna, we're gonna need to give our reasons
we
why we're not
need
doing
to
that.
get up there and figure out what we're gonna do.
So, yeah.
Right
so,
now, it's a no.
Yeah.
Okay,
It's
the
not safe.
Yeah.
road foreman and the liaison of the Public Works Department says no.
I don't think
We
you
have-
guys wanna spend $5,500 a month on a set of lights again all summer long.
No.
That's a waste. Unless Lincoln wants to pay for it, so they're the ones gonna use it. And I'll state that right here.
Well, and
You
even
just did.
then, one good rain event, it changes the
Yes.
whole dynamic with that road is.
Yeah.
It's not like-
And I
it's
think
not
that-
like-
Unfortunately,
I think people
it's,
got
yeah.
It's not safe.
Nope,
Well,
they've gotten used to it.
If I would've had my shot at department head,
That's,
Well, that's
that's,
it.
you, that, the new thing is it's the first and the last meet, the last meeting.
told you
So
it's
it's first
wrong.
meeting.
well,
But throw something in here.
on that note then, I'm gonna voice my opinion, that's stupid. Because I could've left a long time ago. But anyways, I'll wait till we get to that part of it and I'll.
I apologize. I'll let you know next time.
You'd read the agenda, you'd have seen you weren't on there.
Yeah, but if I'm department head, if I'm,
Well,
Anyways,
That was my
keep
idea
going,
to
keep
try
going,
to,
keep
so
going.
all you guys wouldn't have to come every 2 weeks.
Yeah,
Department heads are going, public safety is police, fire, road department, and
water and sewer.
water and sewer. They're the,
So every other,
It'll be,
Every-
you'll be the first.
once a
meeting
month,
of
you're
the
gonna give a
month, yeah.
department head meeting
oh,
report.
Did you think I just didn't call you?
yeah.
Sorry to make you look, but then you got to see the parks presentation.
Yeah,
All right, so yeah, just to be clear, so for that road, I'm totally fine with keeping it closed. We obviously need to look at it, and so I don't want it just where it's just a blanket, no, we're not opening it, because I know people are gonna ask me about that, so.
We haven't,
Yeah.
we haven't even gone back and looked at it.
so,
Yeah.
so if there's no, if I don't have a department head later on, then.
Yeah.
I had Driscoll's go up there and remove 4 blocks
Okay,
already, because they were undermined and they were getting ready to go.
right, they're gonna tip.
So your engineers that said they weren't gonna go to the bottom are totally wrong, because one of them would have made it if it didn't hit the tree.
Oh, great.
So it didn't go.
Right.
So was he right or wrong?
Anyway, so we got 2 off, 2 are down in the bank.
Wow.
We took more gravel up while Driscoll's were there, and he made more berms to divert the water away from the slide back towards the mountainside,
Okay.
to go into
Towards
the
the north.
ditches and down the culverts, to keep the water from
Where
not
it
going
belongs.
over.
How does the road look anymore?
It's more of the pavement's caved off.
Yes, okay.
It's down to. You don't have much more than 1 lane left
Okay.
right now,
Yeah, it's not safe to open.
Okay, all right, good.
so as of
Right.
right now, no.
Okay,
So.
all right, thank you for that update. That's great to know. Well, not great to
Um,
know.
I went to the library board as a resident the other night.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah, you were there on Zoom.
Yep.
And, asked a few questions about flying the flag and other things, and I just asked them I says, I was wondering from the boards, from this board member, why you didn't come, we've always seen your budget previously. You presented a budget to us, even though we don't vote on it as a
Right.
board. But you, and graciously to come and bring your budget to us, and we didn't see it this year.
So they did send it along to us in terms of making it for the town report, but
Right.
it's never been, as far as I'm aware, I don't remember the library
Used
coming
to,
and presenting a budget. Is that
Used to come in-
unless
Yeah,
I'm
they
incorrect?
used to,
Really?
way back.
Okay, so maybe that's why. I don't remember as long as I've been a
I
board
said it's been
member
a
that
while.
they've come and presented one.
Then they
I
were
mean, we could
gonna-
definitely invite them to.
And then they're gonna bring
It's in
something
their
to
own
us.
budget. I mean, it's not.
Well, I know, right, so that's part of it, I mean, they're a hybrid municipal library, we are gonna have a discussion about where they want to go with that, and so that could potentially change how that happens. It might be something where if they become a full municipal library, that it would, similar to any other
It
department
would
head,
be our budget.
the director would come and present their budget to us as we look at all the other budgets, so.
And then I'll ask Jill this question. Years ago, we were told we want to update some new meters, especially on the sewer district. And how many more meters do we, or maybe Sharon or Chris can tell me, how many meters do we have that still aren't working?
I'll say 25 to 30.
That's a standard. And 3 years ago, was it 25 or 30? Same 25 or 30?
Yeah.
Well, they alternate.
Yeah, I mean, the good news is we just
And
found
that-
out that
that-
our meters, a lot of those meters are partial, at least partial warranty, that we may be able to get. return on recently.
All right, I'll check with her then.
Yeah.
That's all I got.
All right, and I got the generator from the pump house. It's been sitting over there for over a year now. Are we
Almost
gonna, are we gonna unload that or?
I will find out.
Old one?
Yeah, the old one is still sitting there. I sent these pictures to, never got a reply to 2 generators.
Mhm.
Cat, Milton Cat, they were interested in it, and then Gary Dubois is interested in it, and I never heard back.
Yeah. I don't have any idea. what
Gary
it's
said
worth.
it won't run his, he went out and looked at it, he said it won't run my
Yeah.
pit.
Okay, I will,
Trying to put
I'll
it,
dig into the previous file, see if I can find anything about that.
And see, maybe if we can get either we advertise it and get a starting price or
Okay,
advertise it for bid like we normally do with a minimum.
yeah. I know we still have the old traffic light, or not traffic light, sorry, the old street lights.
Yeah.
I think we were gonna sell those at some point.
give one to the state
Are
of
they still
Vermont,
sitting over?
give one to the state of Vermont, and use it up on the bridge.
Mhm.
One is broke.
I think they're all working amazingly. I
Yeah.
think they fixed
That was
them all.
one can, is it? One
No, I-
broke? Oh, did they
no,
get
that-
all 6 of them?
No, there's on
One of the
the,
lower level, I thought by Randy's is the top's gone.
oh, maybe. They're
Sure.
all, the lights are all working, for all the lights that are on the bridge. So that's nice.
Okay. I had something else, but I don't remember what it was.
Okay.
Interim town administrators report.
Yeah, I've done a little list, which I sent you guys. That's up on the website too. I'm at a point now where I can actually do a list. It won't be the same as Valerie's report, which detailed sort of what was being talked about in the meeting, but it just gives a list of what I've been working on, just to keep you guys updated. So as I said, police negotiations meeting number 7. We reached an agreement, which is nice. I'm working on this, sending all the official letters for appointments, updating website, doing some NEMRIC troubleshooting and learning that, education about that. We're doing like an internal file organization and beta testing of Box/Dropbox for the file server for inside here, for staff to use. I did the follow-up letters, emails, for the Lawson Lane service line project loan. So those have gone out to those residents.
We got one payment today.
Good, it's already working, so that's
Good.
great, fantastic. So that was it's a 5-year loan program for those residents, and that was obviously updated when the Pine Street project was happening, so I circled back on that. Had a meeting with Josh and John and Jill and Steve and Eric to discuss the tree planting. So we're all getting together in terms of, they're gonna look at a set of the plans, Steve's current plans for phase 2, which is Bristol West. And Josh and John are gonna do their markings of where they'd like to see trees on a number of the streets, and then they're gonna make sure that.
Don't get 30 on, no,
Working with, no,
Chris wants 5 right. in front of
yeah,
his
I know, we talked about that, so that's good. And, just in terms of those, both the tree people and the water people coming together to know where the water lines are gonna be, and where the best place for trees are. So that's good.
You don't wanna plant them and dig them back out?
No, not really.
I did, speaking of that, though, my street has quite a few of those nice new ones. And some of them are right on their power lines. I thought we were putting trees on their power, or these trees that don't grow that high. I don't know.
They're not as tall,
Yeah,
not as
they're
big.
short,
as-
so-
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then
Yeah.
we always be short. Tree always grows on that. I always thought they did, but they don't
Well,
know.
they just go to a certain height and then they go out.
Okay.
And then trim them.
Yeah.
if they're like crab
Yeah,
apple and
it's-
that.
yeah, they've considered that.
I guess, follow up, did the canopy ever get caught this fall? Canopy in the village that Peter mentioned,
No,
never got cut. And did Butler ever do the sidewalk?
yes.
He did do that, okay.
I saw a letter of support for the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Block Grant. This was through the Regional Planning Commission. This would be working with multiple communities to update enhanced energy plans. We haven't updated ours since 2019, I believe. That may not happen because the deadline might have been missed for that, not on our side, but on the regional planning. So we're trying to group a whole bunch of people together and have one town run it. But I'm waiting to hear back on that. We did a kickoff meeting, brief meeting with Rebecca Elder, who is the Regional Planning Commission Municipal Project Manager for the Airport Drive Sidewalk Project. And so myself and AZ did that meeting here. One of the discussion items that came up with regard to that was usually we've done an RFQ or an RFP. It would be an RFQ for this one process to request for engineers for the project. The state, VTrans offers an at the ready method of already vetted engineers for the project, and you pick 3 that you're interested in, and then the information comes back to us. So I think we're going to head in that direction because it seems a little bit easier and it's quicker to move that way. And also it doesn't require the time for either myself or for AZ to do the whole RFQ process. So it seems like we'll get ahead, and I'm sure that the pricing, I don't know if we'll save a little bit with that, or if it's just the speed at which we can move on that project.
I doubt we'll save anything.
No, it doesn't seem like it'd be okay. We had a water system meeting with RCAP Solutions. This was with Jill, myself, and Steve, Joshua Lockhead, and John Kernan. And they are contracted with the state to work with small municipalities who have water systems to be able to provide assistance. And we're looking at how they can help us. There's also another group that reached out to us. Again, same kind of thing. And so we're going to try to get them to be doing different projects for the water system and sewer system. I followed up with Asher Nelson of Vermont Integrated Architecture, which I mentioned, and then Silver Maple Construction, who declined, but hopefully we can reach out again sometime soon. So that's what I've been doing.
All right. Have you been busy? Any other business, correspondence reports, correspondence received?
No, I do have the budget report that Sharon put together that I didn't previously share. That is on the website, and you're on Basecamp too. So that is the general fund, police department, sewer and water for up to month 8 of this year.
Yeah, and I'll be closing books again next Monday, so
Okay.
there'll be a new one.
Okay, fantastic.
Executive session.
Yes, we do have an executive session regarding personnel. And I'd invite Sharon Lucia and Chris Perley into the meeting.
You want us to support? Hell no. Okay. You know, I know, so make sure.
Michelle?
Make a motion, we enter into executive session per 1 VSA section 330. Discuss personnel matters, and I invite Chris and Sharon to.
Thanks.
Super,
Second.
thank you.
Motion and a second to go into exeexecutive session.
Thanks, Jimmy.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carried.
All right, let me look at who's on here.
So
Hold on one sec. Let's remove this here. That's Michelle, that's Jessica, that's us, and that's me.
Recording
You
all.
can like knock me out if you want, I'll just go to bed.
I'll stop.
Me
for this.
too.